The satellite phone crackled with static and distance. Jack Reeves pressed it harder against his ear, as if proximity could bridge the 7,000 miles between a forward operating base in Kandahar and his sister's apartment in Denver. Around him, the Afghan sun beat down on plywood and sandbags, turning the compound into an oven that smelled of dust and diesel fuel. Elena's voice came through fragmented, each word fighting through interference. "Jack, I need to tell you something." His commanding officer stood 3 feet away, arms crossed, face unreadable beneath the brim of his patrol cap. The posture said everything Jack needed to know about what was coming next. "Hold on, Elena, you're cutting out." Static swallowed her next words. Then a burst of clarity. "He's going to kill me. I know he is, but nobody will." The line went dead. Jack stared at the phone's blank screen, his heartbeat suddenly loud in his ears. The compound continued its afternoon rhythm around him, soldiers moving between buildings, the distant thump of a helicopter, someone laughing at a joke he couldn't hear. Normal sounds in a place where nothing was normal. He tried calling back. No answer. Tried again. Nothing. The CO stepped closer. His voice carried the weight of a man about to deliver bad news that would hurt both of them. "Reeves, we need to talk about your leave request." Jack kept his eyes on the phone, willing it to ring, willing Elena to call back and tell him it was a mistake, a misunderstanding, that she was fine and he was worrying over nothing. The CO continued. "Operation Spearhead kicks off in 48 hours. We're already short on experienced NCOs. I can't spare you." The words landed like physical blows. Jack looked up, meeting his commander's eyes. "Sir, my sister just told me someone's going to kill her. I need to go home." "Who's the threat?" "Her boyfriend, Marcus Webb. He's a Denver cop." The CO's expression shifted slightly, a micro-adjustment that spoke volumes. The look of a man who'd just heard something that complicated an already complicated situation. "A police officer?" "Yes, sir. And your sister's concern is—" "He's been abusing her. For 2 years. She finally tried to leave him last month. Now she's scared." The CO was quiet for a moment, weighing options that Jack couldn't see but could feel in the silence between them. Finally, "Reeves, I'm sorry. If this was any other week, I'd approve it. But Spearhead is critical. Your Pashto skills are mission essential. We lose you. We lose our only reliable translator for the target region." Jack felt something cold settle in his chest, the kind of cold that came before anger, before grief, before any emotion that had a name. "Sir, she said he's going to kill her." "I understand, but right now I need you to understand something too." The CO's voice dropped lower, taking on the tone of a man who'd made impossible choices before and would make them again. 73 men are about to walk into hostile territory. If the intelligence brief fails because we don't have proper translation support, some of those men won't come home. Can you live with that? The question hung in the superheated air. Jack wanted to say yes, wanted to tell his CO that Elena was his blood, his family, his responsibility before anything else. But the cold thing in his chest spread outward, filling the spaces where certainty should have been. "No, sir, I can't." The CO nodded once, a sharp movement that acknowledged the sacrifice without celebrating it. "Call Denver PD. Have them do a welfare check. If there's a real threat, they'll handle it." Jack made the call from the communications tent. The desk sergeant who answered sounded bored, tired, operating on the edge of indifference that came from fielding too many calls about problems that weren't emergencies. "Denver Police Department, Sergeant Morrison. I need to request a welfare check on my sister, Elena Reeves, 2847 Maple Street, apartment 3B. What's the nature of your concern?" "She called me 20 minutes ago, said her boyfriend was going to kill her, then the line went dead." Morrison's tone shifted slightly, moving from bored to procedural. "Did she say she was in immediate danger?" "She said he was going to kill her. That sounds pretty immediate to me." "Sir, I understand your concern. Can you tell me who her boyfriend is?" "Marcus Webb. He's one of yours, a Denver cop." The pause that followed told Jack everything he needed to know about how this would go. When Morrison spoke again, his voice carried a different quality. Protective, defensive. "Officer Webb, I know Marcus. He's a good cop. Been on the force 6 years, excellent record. I'm sure his record is great. My sister has bruises that say otherwise. Sir, domestic situations are complicated. Has your sister filed a formal complaint? She's terrified of him. He's a cop with a gun and a badge and friends who will back him up, so no. She hasn't filed a complaint. Then I'm not sure what you expect us to do. We can't just show up at an officer's residence based on a phone call from someone who's... Where are you calling from? Afghanistan. Right. Someone who's in Afghanistan who got a drop call. Sir, cell service in Denver can be unreliable. It doesn't mean there's an emergency. Jack's knuckles went white around the phone. The cold in his chest was spreading now, reaching his extremities, making his fingers feel numb despite the heat. Send someone to check on her, please. I'll make a note in the system. If we have a unit in the area, they'll swing by. But I can't promise anything. We're short-staffed tonight. The call ended. Jack sat in the communications tent for another hour, trying Elena's number 17 more times. No answer, no voicemail, nothing. 72 hours later, Operation Spearhead concluded with 0 friendly casualties and the successful extraction of a high-value target. Jack's translation work had been flawless. His commanding officer would later recommend him for a commendation. That same day, Jack's commanding officer approached him during the post-mission debrief. The look on his face erased any satisfaction Jack might have felt about the operation's success. Reeves, my office, now. They walked in silence across the compound. The Afghan sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of red that looked like blood. Jack's boots crunched on gravel. Each step felt heavier than the last. Inside the plywood office, the CO closed the door, gestured to a chair. Jack remained standing. The words came quick and clean. The way a medic removes a bandage from a wound. There's been an incident. Your sister, Elena. I'm sorry, son. She's gone. The world narrowed to a point. The office walls receded. Sound became muffled, as if Jack had been submerged underwater. His CO's mouth kept moving, but the words took time to penetrate. Found in her apartment. Apparent suicide. Hung herself. Boyfriend discovered the body. I'm sorry. Jack heard himself ask, when? 3 days ago. 3 days. 72 hours. The exact span of time Jack had been busy being mission essential, being indispensable, being anywhere except where Elena needed him. Her boyfriend found her? Marcus Webb. According to the report, he'd been trying to reach her all day, used his key when she didn't answer, called 911 immediately, tried CPR. Couldn't save her. The cold in Jack's chest crystallized into something sharp and cutting. It wasn't suicide. The CO's expression softened into something that looked like pity. Jack, I know this is hard to accept. It wasn't suicide. He killed her. The Denver PD investigation concluded. The Denver PD is investigating one of their own. You think that's going to be thorough? The CO sat down heavily in his chair, rubbed his face with both hands. Jack, I'm granting you emergency leave effective immediately. 2 weeks. There's a transport heading to Bagram in 3 hours. You'll be on it. Jack made it home for the funeral. Elena's casket was closed. The funeral director had suggested it gently, citing the nature of how she'd died, the condition of the body, the family's desire to remember her as she'd been in life. Jack had agreed because arguing felt impossible and nothing felt real anyway. Marcus Webb attended the service. He wore a dark suit and an expression of profound grief. Other Denver cops flanked him, a wall of blue solidarity around a brother who'd lost his girlfriend to her own demons. They took turns offering condolences, each one a variation on the same theme. Such a tragedy, nobody could have seen it coming. Marcus did everything he could. Jack stood near the back of the chapel, flanked by his own brothers. Not blood brothers, military brothers. Marcus Reed, built like a tank with a red beard and hands that could crush walnuts. Jack's Chen, quiet and observant, still carrying the economy of movement that came from being a combat medic. David Torres, smaller and wiry, the kind of man who could fix anything electronic or bypass anything secured. Tommy Sullivan, the youngest at 38, with a sniper's patience and a face that looked too innocent for the body count he had accumulated. They'd all flown in from different corners of the country. None of them had said much. Their presence was the statement. Marcus Webb approached Jack after the service, extended his hand. His eyes were red-rimmed, his voice thick with what sounded like genuine emotion. Jack, I'm so sorry for your loss. Elena meant everything to me. Jack looked at the offered hand, looked at Webb's face, saw the performance behind the grief, the careful construction of a man playing the role of bereaved boyfriend. He didn't take the hand. Webb's expression flickered, just for a moment. A micro-expression that revealed something cold beneath the manufactured sorrow. Then it was gone, replaced by understanding that looked almost sincere. I know you're hurting. I know you probably have questions. The last few months were hard on Elena. She was struggling with depression. I tried to get her help, but she kept refusing. I thought I had more time. Jack's hands curled into fists at his sides. Marcus Reed's hand landed on his shoulder, a grip that looked casual but felt like a vice, holding him in place, keeping him from doing something they'd all regret. Webb continued, his voice dropping to something that might have been compassion if you didn't look too close. She called out for you at the end, in her note, said she was sorry you were so far away, said she wished she could have held on until you got home. The words were designed to wound. Jack could see it in the slight tightening around Webb's eyes, the faint curl at the corner of his mouth that almost became a smile. This man had killed his sister and was now using her death as a weapon. Jack's voice came out flat and cold. I know what you did. Webb's mask slipped again, this time for longer. His eyes hardened, his jaw set, and when he spoke, the grief was gone completely. Your sister was mentally ill, Jack. Unstable. The department has my report, has the psychiatric evaluations, has everything they need to close this case. If you want to make accusations, go ahead. But you'll be the one who looks crazy. Marcus Reed's grip on Jack's shoulder tightened further. A silent message. Not here, not now, not like this. Webb turned away, paused, looked back with something that might have been genuine pity if you were generous. I tried to help her, Jack. Some people just can't be saved. The other cops surrounded Webb, closing ranks, and they left as a unit, protecting their own, the way cops always did. Jack stood in the chapel for a long time after everyone else had gone. The funeral home had dimmed the lights. The flowers around Elena's casket were already starting to wilt. He approached slowly, placed his hand on the polished wood. His voice came out as a whisper. I'm sorry, Elena. I should have been here. The casket offered no forgiveness, no absolution, just silence. I should have come home. I should have believed you. I should have... The words trailed off because there were no words that could bridge the gap between should have and didn't, between intention and action, between the brother he'd wanted to be and the brother he'd actually been. Marcus Reed appeared beside him, didn't speak, just stood there, a solid presence in the darkness. Finally, Jack found more words. These ones came from somewhere deeper, somewhere colder. I swear on everything I am, I will never ignore someone calling for help again. Marcus nodded slowly. I will never let a good man's badge protect an evil one. Another nod. And I will never let distance be my excuse for doing nothing. Marcus's voice was quiet but firm. We'll get him, Jack. Maybe not today, maybe not this year, but we'll get him the right way, legal, clean, so it sticks. But they never did. The investigation into Elena's death closed within a week. The medical examiner ruled it suicide by hanging. The psychiatric evaluation noted a history of depression and anxiety. Marcus Webb's statement was thorough and consistent. The physical evidence supported the conclusion. Case closed. Jack tried to reopen it, hired a private investigator. The man was competent and sympathetic and ultimately useless. Webb's alibi was airtight. He'd been on duty the day Elena died, with multiple witnesses placing him at the station during the estimated time of death. The suicide note was in Elena's handwriting, confirmed by 2 independent experts. There were no signs of forced entry, no evidence of a struggle, nothing that suggested anyone else had been present. The private investigator delivered his final report with obvious reluctance. Mr. Reeves, I'm sorry. If there's evidence Webb killed your sister, I can't find it. Everything points to suicide. Gee, sometimes the truth is just sad, not sinister. Jack knew better. Knew it in his bones, in his gut, in every instinct he'd honed over 3 combat tours. But knowing and proving were different things. And the system had decided that Marcus Webb was a grieving boyfriend and Elena Reeves was a tragic statistic. 10 years passed. Jack left the Army, moved to a cabin in Montana where the nearest neighbor was 5 miles away. Worked odd jobs when he needed money, which wasn't often because his needs were few. Kept in touch with his brothers through irregular phone calls and occasional visits. Tried to build a life that didn't include the weight of Elena's death. It didn't work. The weight followed him, settled into his bones, became part of his structure. On the 10th anniversary of Elena's death, Jack found himself standing at her grave again. The headstone was simple: Elena Marie Reeves, beloved sister, 1979-2014. No mention of how she died. No attempt to find meaning in the loss. Jack placed fresh flowers at the base of the stone, stood there as the Montana wind cut through his jacket. His phone buzzed. Marcus Reed, texting from New Mexico. "You okay, brother?" Jack typed back, "Fine, just visiting." The response came quickly. "Need company?" "No, but thanks. Call if that changes." Jack slipped the phone back into his pocket, looked at his sister's name carved into granite. 10 years. A decade of carrying guilt that had no outlet, rage that had no target, grief that had no end. His phone buzzed again. Different contact this time. Tommy Sullivan. "Been thinking. We should do a ride. Just the 5 of us. Like old times. Where?" "Anywhere. Nevada maybe. Desert roads. Clear your head." Jack stared at the message for a long moment, then typed, "When? Next week. I'll set it up." The ride had no purpose beyond brotherhood and motion. 5 men on 5 motorcycles, cutting across state lines with no destination in mind. They met in Flagstaff, spent the first night sharing beers and old stories, then headed north toward Nevada. The desert landscape rolled past in shades of red and brown. Jack felt something loosen in his chest. Not healing, but maybe the beginning of it. The bike's engine thrummed beneath him. The highway stretched endless ahead. His brothers rode in formation around him, close enough to matter, far enough to let him breathe. They weren't looking for trouble, weren't looking for anything except maybe a reason to keep the engines running and the road beneath them. Just 5 men trying to outrun their own ghosts. But trouble had a way of finding men who knew how to handle it. And the diner they pulled into at 11:45 on a Tuesday night in a town called Silver Ridge would change everything. Rose's all-night diner sat at the edge of town where the streetlights gave up trying. Neon buzzed in the window, red letters promising open 24 hours and coffee that was always fresh. The parking lot held 3 cars, all of them old enough to have stories. Jack pulled his bike into a space near the door, killed the engine, and felt the sudden silence of a machine at rest. His brothers pulled in beside him. Marcus Reed stretched, joints popping, beard catching the sodium light. Jack's chin moved with the fluid economy of someone whose body never forgot how to conserve energy. David Torres was already checking his phone, scrolling through something that made his face glow blue. Tommy Sullivan dismounted last, his eyes scanning the parking lot out of habit, looking for threats that probably weren't there but might be. The diner's interior was exactly what Jack expected. Vinyl booths, checkerboard floor, a counter with stools that spun, the smell of coffee and fryer grease, fluorescent lights that turned everything slightly yellow. An old man asleep in booth 3, head tilted back, mouth open, snoring softly. Jack's tactical assessment was automatic. 3 exits, front door, kitchen door, emergency exit in back marked with faded red. Occupants, sleeping old man, cook visible through the pass-through window, 1 waitress. Threat level, 0. But something felt wrong. Not dangerous, just wrong. The waitress approached with menus tucked under her arm, late 30s, maybe 40, brown hair pulled back in a ponytail that had been neater at the start of her shift. Uniform that had seen too many wash cycles, name tag that read Sarah, and eyes that held the particular wariness Jack recognized from 1,000 other places. The look of someone who'd learned that survival meant staying small, staying quiet, staying unnoticed. She flinched when she saw them. Barely, a micro movement that someone who wasn't trained to read body language might have missed. But Jack saw it, saw the way her shoulders tensed, saw the practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes, saw the old bruises on her wrist, faded to yellow-green, but still visible beneath the fluorescent lights. Her voice was careful, practiced, designed to be pleasant without inviting conversation. "Evening, gentlemen. Sit anywhere you'd like." Jack's brothers headed for the corner booth, the one with clear sight lines to all exits, backs to the wall, good defensive position. Old habits. Sarah followed them, notepad already in hand. Efficient, experienced, someone who'd done this job long enough that the movements were automatic. She didn't make eye contact, kept her gaze at chin level, high enough to be polite, low enough to avoid connection. Jack noticed everything. The way she held herself slightly angled away from them, body language creating distance. The tremor in her left hand. The way she bit her lower lip when she thought no one was looking. The tan line on her ring finger where a wedding band had been removed recently. Marcus broke the silence with his usual directness. "Coffee, black, whatever you've got for food." Sarah's pen moved across the notepad. "Burgers okay? They're fresh." "Perfect." She worked her way around the table, each order delivered in the same careful voice. When she reached Jack, her eyes met his for just a moment. He saw the recognition there, not of him specifically, but of the type, military, combat experience. Someone who'd seen violence and learned how to use it, and he saw fear, the bone-deep kind that came from experience, not imagination. Jack kept his voice level, non-threatening. "Same as them. And thank you, ma'am." The ma'am made her pause. She looked at him again, this time with something like surprise, as if basic courtesy was unexpected, as if men treating her with respect was notable. She nodded once, turned away, headed toward the kitchen. Marcus leaned forward, voice low. "You see what I see?" Jack nodded. Jack's chin spoke next, his tone clinical. "Old bruises. Patterns suggest repeated trauma. Defensive injuries on forearms, possible fractured wrist, healed badly." David Torres looked up from his phone. "Not our business." Tommy Sullivan's jaw tightened. "When has that ever stopped us?" Jack watched Sarah through the pass-through window, watched her clip the order to the line, watched her pour coffee, watched her move through the diner's routines with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd learned that staying busy meant staying safe. His chest felt tight. Marcus's voice cut through his thoughts. "Jack, what are you thinking?" Jack took a long breath. "I'm thinking someone's hurting her. I'm thinking we should finish our coffee and leave. I'm thinking trouble isn't what we came here for. But I keep seeing Elena, the way she moved those last few months. That same careful way of existing without taking up space." The table went quiet. Elena's name carried weight among them. They'd all known her. All failed her in their own ways. Too far away, too late, too focused on other things. Jack's chin's voice was gentle. "Jack, we can't save everyone. I know, but we're here now, and she's here now. And if something happens while we're sitting 3 feet away doing nothing..." He didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. They all knew how it ended. Sarah returned with 5 coffees balanced on a tray, set them down one by one with hands that shook slightly, pulled out her notepad. "Food'll be up in about 10 minutes. Can I get you anything else?" Jack studied her face. Saw exhaustion etched into every line. Saw someone running on fumes and force of will. "How much longer's your shift?" The question made her pause. Her eyes flicked to the clock on the wall. 12:17 a.m. 4 more hours. Long night. Every night's long." The words slipped out before she could stop them. She looked startled at her own honesty, then covered it with a professional smile. "But it's fine. It's a job." She turned to leave. Jack's instinct screamed at him to say something, do something, make sure she knew help was available if she needed it. But what could he say that wouldn't sound creepy or condescending? What could he offer that wouldn't make things worse? Marcus kicked him under the table. A silent message. Let it go. Jack drank his coffee and tried to convince himself that Marcus was right. that Sarah was an adult who could handle her own problems, that 5 strangers showing up and playing White Knight would probably make things worse, not better, that sometimes the kindest thing was to mind your own business and leave people alone. But his gut said different. His gut said trouble was coming, and when it arrived, good men would need to make a choice. Sarah returned with their burgers 15 minutes later, set them down with the same practiced efficiency, started to turn away. The door slammed open hard enough to rattle the blinds. Jack's hand moved automatically toward where his sidearm would have been if he was still deployed. Found nothing. Old instincts in a civilian world. The man who stumbled through the door was 30-something, well-dressed beneath the obvious intoxication, moving with the particular swagger of someone who'd never faced consequences. Jack's assessment was instant and brutal. 6'1", 190, drunk enough to be dangerous but not drunk enough to be helpless. Expensive watch, designer shirt unbuttoned at the collar. The kind of man who thought rules applied to other people. Sarah's reaction told Jack everything he needed to know. She went completely still, not frozen with surprise, frozen with fear. The kind of freeze response that came from experience, from knowing what happened next and being powerless to stop it. The drunk man's eyes found her immediately. His face split into a grin that held no warmth. Well, 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 if it isn't my favorite tenant. His voice carried the thick consonants of someone 3 drinks past sober. Jack filed away that detail. Tenant. This wasn't a random drunk. This was someone with power over Sarah's housing. Sarah's voice came out, carefully controlled. We're closing soon, Brandon. You should head home. Brandon. First name basis, familiar enough that she didn't need his last name. Jack watched the dynamic play out, reading the subtext beneath every gesture. Brandon stumbled forward, not toward a booth, towards Sarah. His finger jabbed the air in her direction. Don't tell me what to do. You're 3 days late on rent, Sarah. 3 days. I told you I'll have it Friday. I get paid Friday. Friday's not good enough. Brandon closed the distance. The smell of whiskey rolled off him in waves. I think you're not taking this seriously. I think you need a lesson in respect. The 5 men in the corner booth exchanged glances. Marcus Reed shifted his weight, ready to move. Jack's Chen's eyes went cold and clinical, the look of a man assessing injuries before they happened. David Torres's hand slid toward his pocket. Tommy Sullivan's shoulders rolled back, loosening muscles that remembered combat. Jack stood slowly, deliberately, not aggressive, just present. Brandon noticed, turned toward him with the loose-limbed confidence of the very drunk or very stupid. The fuck are you looking at? Jack kept his voice level and calm. Nothing important, just someone who should leave the lady alone. Lady? Brandon laughed, a wet, ugly sound. That's rich. You know what this lady is? She's a broke single mom who can't pay her rent on time. She's a charity case living in my trailer park. Sarah's face flushed, embarrassment mixing with rage, mixing with helplessness. Her hands clenched at her sides. Jack took a step forward, not threatening, just reducing the distance, making himself harder to ignore. Sir, I'm asking you politely to leave. Sir? Brandon's eyes narrowed. You military? Was. Well, thank you for your service. The words dripped with mockery. But this is between me and my tenant. So why don't you sit your ass back down and mind your business? Behind Jack, his brother stood as one. No words needed, just movement. 4 large men rising in synchronized silence. Brandon's drunk brain finally registered danger. His swagger faltered. But alcohol and entitlement are a dangerous combination, and neither was ready to back down. The fuck is this? You guys some kind of biker gang? Marcus Reed's voice rumbled from his chest. Just 5 men who think you should leave. This is my town. My family owns half the real estate. My father's the goddamn mayor. Brandon's voice was rising, losing the control that sobriety might have maintained. You don't know who you're fucking with. Jack kept his tone neutral. We don't care who you are. We care that you're bothering this woman. Last time I'm asking nicely, leave. Or what? Or we make you leave. Brandon stared at Jack, at his brothers, at 5 men who'd spent years in places where violence was policy and hesitation meant death. Something in Brandon's alcohol-soaked brain finally did the math and came up with a number he didn't like. He turned back to Sarah, grabbed her shoulder. His fingers dug in hard enough to leave marks. This isn't over. You and me, we're going to have a conversation about respect. Jack moved. Not fast, not aggressive, just precise. His hand closed on Brandon's wrist, applied pressure to specific nerves. Brandon's grip on Sarah released involuntarily. Brandon's face went red, then purple. Get your fucking hands off me. Jack maintained the pressure. Walk away. Now. I'll have you arrested. Assault on a drunk man who was assaulting a woman? Yes. Please call the cops. I'd love to give a statement. Brandon yanked his arm free, stumbled backward. His eyes darted between Jack and Sarah, calculating. Then he did something Jack didn't expect. He lunged at Sarah, not clumsily, not drunkenly, with sudden, vicious intent. His fist pulled back, aimed at her face. Jack intercepted, caught Brandon's arm mid-swing, redirected the momentum. Brandon crashed into an empty booth, his body making an ugly sound against vinyl and formica. Sarah scrambled backward. Her hand found the counter. Her breathing came quick and shallow, the edge of panic. Brandon pushed himself upright. Blood trickled from his nose where he'd hit the table. His eyes held something worse than rage now. Something cold and calculated beneath the alcohol. You just made the biggest mistake of your life, whoever you are. Jack Reeves. Jack Reeves. Brandon tested the name like he was memorizing it. Okay, Jack Reeves. Let me explain how things work in Silver Ridge. My family owns this town, the police, the judges, everything. You think you can put your hands on me and walk away? Marcus Reed stepped forward. We all saw you attack her first. Your word against mine, and I'm a Cain. Brandon wiped blood from his nose. Sarah, baby, you should have just paid your rent on time. Now you're evicted. You and that brat daughter of yours, out by Friday. Sarah's face went white. Brandon continued, his voice taking on a sing-song quality. And maybe I'll have child services take a look at your situation. Single mom, can't pay rent, hanging out with dangerous biker types. Doesn't sound like a safe environment for a 6-year-old. Jack felt something cold settle in his chest, the same cold he'd felt on that satellite phone 10 years ago, the cold that came before decisions that couldn't be unmade. Sarah found her voice. Please, my daughter, please don't. Should have thought about your daughter before you disrespected me. Brandon headed toward the door, paused, turned back. Oh, and Jack Reeves? My father will know your name by morning. Sleep light. He left. The door swung shut behind him with a soft pneumatic hiss. The diner fell into silence. The old man in booth 3 kept snoring, oblivious. The cook watched through the pass-through window, face carefully neutral, the expression of someone who'd learned not to see things that might require action. Sarah stood frozen. Her whole body trembled. Then her legs gave out. She caught herself on the counter, lowered herself to sitting on the floor, and started to cry with the kind of helplessness that comes from knowing you're trapped and there's no way out. Jack knelt beside her, kept his distance, kept his voice gentle. Ma'am, are you okay? Stupid question. Of course she wasn't okay, but sometimes stupid questions were all you had. Sarah shook her head. Words came between sobs. You don't understand. The Cains own everything. The trailer park, the police, the judges. He can do whatever he wants. He threatened you. He threatens everyone. Nobody does anything about it. She looked up at Jack, her eyes red and desperate. You just made it worse. He'll come back. He always comes back. Marcus crouched down on Sarah's other side. Ma'am, you have options. You can press charges, and go where? Live where? I can barely afford the trailer I'm in now. And if I make trouble, no one in this county will rent to me. Fresh tears streamed down her face. I have a daughter, a 6-year-old girl who needs stability. I can't fight him. I can't. She couldn't finish the sentence. Just sat there on the diner floor, crying with the kind of exhaustion that goes bone deep. Jack stood, walked to the door, looked out at the parking lot where Brandon's expensive car was peeling out onto the highway. Made a decision that would change everything. He pulled out his phone, dialed a number he hadn't used in 3 years. The voice that answered was crisp despite the late hour. Diana Torres, attorney at law. Diana, it's Jack Reeves. A pause, then warmth flooded her tone. Jack, it's been forever. What's wrong? I need a lawyer. Housing discrimination, illegal eviction, possibly witness intimidation. Where are you? Silver Ridge, Nevada. Jesus, Kane territory. Diana's voice shifted from warm to professional. Tell me what happened. Jack relayed the events quickly, precisely, while his brothers helped Sarah to her feet and got her a glass of water. When he finished, Diana was quiet for a long moment. Then, Jack, you know I love you, but you just stepped into a war. The Kane family doesn't lose in Silver Ridge. They own the courts. I know. And you're doing this anyway? Jack looked at Sarah, saw Elena, saw every woman who'd ever called for help and been ignored. I have to, Diana sighed. Okay, give me tonight to pull records. I'll fly out tomorrow. But Jack, this is going to get ugly. It already is. He hung up, turned to find Sarah staring at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Hope mixed with disbelief, mixed with something that looked like fear. Her voice came out small. Why are you helping me? You don't even know me. Jack thought about Elena, about satellite phones and denied leave requests and a casket with a closed lid, about 10 years of carrying guilt that had no outlet. His answer was simple and true, because someone should, and I'm here. Sarah's face crumpled. Fresh tears came, but different this time. Not helpless, something else. The door burst open again. Jack spun, hand moving automatically to defensive position. But it wasn't Brandon. Two cops stepped through the door, both in uniform, one older, maybe 50, with sergeant stripes and a weathered face. One younger, early 30s, with the rigid posture of someone still trying to prove himself. The older cop's eyes swept the diner, landed on Sarah sitting at the counter with 5 large men around her. His expression tightened. We got a call about a disturbance. Marcus Reed stepped forward, his voice calm. No disturbance, officer. Just some folks having coffee. That so? The cop's nameplate read Daniels. His eyes moved to Sarah. You okay, miss? Sarah hesitated. Jack could see the calculation happening behind her eyes. Tell the truth and risk Kane retaliation. Lie and stay safe. She opened her mouth, closed it, looked at Jack. Jack made the decision for her. Officer, there was an incident. Brandon Kane came in drunk, assaulted this woman. We intervened. There are witnesses. Daniel's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Recognition, not surprise, more like confirmation of something he'd suspected. Brandon Kane assaulted someone? Yes. The younger cop, nameplate reading Morrison, stepped forward. And you are? Jack Reeves. You put your hands on Brandon Kane? In defense of this woman, yes. Morrison's face hardened. That's assault. I need to see some ID. All of you. But Daniels held up a hand. Hold on, Morrison. He approached Sarah directly, knelt down so he was at eye level. His voice softened. Sarah, is that true? Did Brandon Kane hurt you? Sarah's voice came out as a whisper. Yes. Did these men attack him unprovoked? No, he grabbed me, threatened me, they protected me. Daniels nodded slowly, stood, turned to Jack. I need to take statements, all of you, but... He glanced at Morrison. I'm not arresting anyone tonight. Clear? Morrison looked ready to argue. Daniels cut him off with a look that carried 20 years of seniority. Jack provided his statement. Precise, factual, military-trained recall that left no room for interpretation. His brothers did the same. The cook came out from the kitchen and corroborated. Even the old man in booth 3, no longer sleeping, confirmed he'd seen Brandon attack Sarah. Daniels took it all down in a notebook that had seen better days. When he finished, he closed the notebook and looked at Jack with an expression that was hard to read. Mr. Reeves, word of advice. The Kane family doesn't take kindly to outsiders interfering in their business. Is that a threat? It's reality. Mayor Kane has been running this town for 20 years. His son Brandon has issues, But those issues tend to disappear because the mayor makes them disappear. Daniels glanced at Sarah. People who cause problems for the Canes tend to leave town shortly after. Jack met Daniels' eyes. I'm not leaving. Then you're a fool. Maybe, but I'm a fool who's not going anywhere. Something that might have been respect flickered across Daniels' face. He handed Jack a card. That's my direct line. If Kane comes back, you call me, not 911, me. Why are you helping? Daniels was quiet for a moment. Then, because I've been watching Brandon Kane hurt people for 5 years, and I'm tired of writing reports that go nowhere. He left with Morrison in tow. The diner fell silent again. Jack checked his watch, 1:37 a.m. His phone buzzed. Diana Torres. I've pulled preliminary records. Kane Properties, LLC, owns 60% of rental units in Silver Ridge. Mayor Kane sits on zoning board, planning commission, and has appointed half the judges. This is going to be complicated. Jack typed back, I know. See you tomorrow. He looked at Sarah. You can't go home tonight. I have to. My daughter's with the babysitter. Then we're coming with you. You don't have to. Yes, we do. Jack's tone left no room for argument. Get your daughter. Pack essentials. We'll find you somewhere safe to stay. Sarah looked at him with red-rimmed eyes. I can't afford. You're not paying. We are. Marcus Reed's voice was firm. Consider it an investment in doing the right thing. 20 minutes later, they were on the road. Sarah in Marcus's truck, the rest following on motorcycles. The address she'd given led to a trailer park called Desert View Estates, a name that promised more than it delivered. The trailers were old, 70s vintage, aluminum siding, dirt yards, cars in various states of disrepair. Sarah's was number 47, distinguished from its neighbors only by the bright drawings taped to the inside of the windows. Children's art, stick figures holding hands, a house with a smiling sun. Sarah went inside, emerged 10 minutes later with a small girl clutching her hand. The girl's eyes were huge and solemn beneath a mop of dark hair. She wore pajamas with cartoon characters and clutched a stuffed rabbit that had seen better days. The girl stared at Jack and his brothers with the frank curiosity of children. Mommy, who are they? Sarah's voice was gentle. These are friends, sweetie. They're going to help us. Help us do what? Stay safe. The girl seemed to accept this. She climbed into the truck without further questions. Children were resilient that way, adaptable, until they weren't. They drove to the Red Rock Motor Lodge, the kind of place that rented by the week and didn't ask questions. Marcus went inside to handle the transaction. Came out 15 minutes later with 2 room keys. Got you the N unit, quiet, good sight lines. Inside, the room was exactly what Jack expected. 2 double beds. Floral bedspreads that had been washed 1,000 times. Carpet that showed traffic patterns. A TV bolted to the dresser. The smell of industrial cleaner and old cigarettes. Sarah put her daughter to bed in one of the double beds. The girl was asleep before Sarah finished tucking her in. The resilience of children again. Or maybe just exhaustion. Sarah turned to Jack and his brothers. I don't know how to thank you. You don't need to thank us, Jack's Chen said quietly. You need to rest. Tomorrow we figure out next steps. Next steps? Jack pulled out a chair from the small table by the window, sat, gestured for Sarah to do the same. Tomorrow you file a police report, official, on record. Then we get you a lawyer. Then we make sure Brandon Kane faces consequences. Sarah's laugh was bitter. You really think that'll work? The Canes own everything. They own a lot, not everything. Jack pulled out his phone, showed her Diana Torres' text. My lawyer's flying in tomorrow. She's good, really good, and she doesn't scare easy. I can't afford a lawyer. You're not paying, we are. Why? Sarah's voice cracked. Why are you doing this? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. Jack was quiet for a long moment. Then, 10 years ago, my sister called me. Said her boyfriend was going to kill her. I was deployed. Couldn't come home. Told myself the system would handle it. What happened? He killed her. Made it look like suicide. System protected him because he was a cop. She died alone and scared and thinking nobody cared. Sarah's eyes filled with tears again. Jack continued, I can't fix what happened to Elena. Can't bring her back. Can't make up for not being there. But I can be here now for you, for your daughter. That's not your burden to carry. Maybe not, but I'm carrying it anyway. Marcus Reed stood. We should let you sleep, but one of us will be outside your door all night. You need anything, just knock. They filed out, all except Jack, who paused in the doorway. Sarah, one more thing. Yeah? You're braver than you think, stronger than you know, and you're not alone, not anymore. He closed the door behind him, heard the lock click, heard Sarah start crying again. Quiet, muffled sobs that she didn't want to wake her daughter. His brother stood in the parking lot. The Nevada night was cold despite the desert. Stars burned overhead with the clarity that only came in places far from cities. Tommy Sullivan lit a cigarette. So we're really doing this? We're really doing this. Kane family's going to come at us hard. Let them. Marcus Reed cracked his knuckles. Like old times? Like old times. Jack Chen's voice was quiet. What if we fail? Jack looked at the door to Sarah's room. Thought about the little girl sleeping inside. The woman who'd been terrorized by a man who thought power meant freedom from consequence. The system that had failed to protect her because power protected its own. He thought about Elena's grave, about the oath he'd sworn and never kept, about 10 years of carrying weight that had no outlet. Then we make sure Sarah and her daughter disappear somewhere the Canes can never find them. But we don't fail. David Torres spoke for the first time in an hour. This could take months. Then we stay months. We've got lives to get back to. Jack turned to look at him. Do we? What are we going back to? I've got a cabin and nightmares. Marcus has a garage and a bottle. Jax has a medical degree he won't use. You code from your basement. Tommy hasn't talked to his daughter in 3 years. He paused, let the silence carry weight. Elena's been dead for 10 years and we're still running from her ghost. Maybe this is why we're here. Maybe this is the one we actually save. Marcus stepped forward, extended his hand. Brothers to the end. Jack clasped it. Brothers to the end. The others joined, 5 hands meeting in the center. An oath renewed, a purpose found. Jack took first watch. Sat in a plastic chair outside Sarah's door with his back to the wall and his eyes on the parking lot. The motel's neon sign buzzed overhead. Traffic on the distant highway was sparse. The occasional semi, the rare car. His phone buzzed at 3 a.m. Diana Torres. Just booked a flight. Land at 11. Meet at diner. Jack typed back. See you there. Another buzz, unknown number. The message was simple and direct. Leave town while you still can. Jack smiled without humor. Type back, no. The response came immediately. Your funeral. Jack pocketed his phone, watched the parking lot, thought about consequences and choices in the space between what a man should do and what he actually does. At 6 a.m., Marcus came to relieve him. They exchanged no words, just a nod, the language of men who'd stood watch together in worse places. Jack went to his own room, lay on the bed fully clothed, stared at the ceiling, thought about Elena, about Sarah, about a little girl with a stuffed rabbit who deserved better than living in fear. Sleep didn't come, but that was okay. He'd gone longer without sleep in worse conditions. This wasn't Afghanistan. This wasn't combat. This was just a small town in Nevada where bad men thought they were untouchable. Jack had learned something in 3 tours overseas. Untouchable was a myth. Everyone could be touched. Everyone could be held accountable. It just took the right pressure in the right places at the right time. The Canes were about to learn that lesson, and Jack Reeves was about to keep a promise he'd made to a sister who couldn't hear him anymore. At 7 a.m., he got up, showered, dressed, knocked on Sarah's door. She answered, looking exhausted. Her daughter sat at the table eating cereal from a plastic bowl. The girl looked up. Hi. Jack smiled. Hey, kiddo. Sleep okay? She nodded, returned to her cereal. Sarah stepped outside, closed the door so her daughter wouldn't hear. I can't go through with this. I can't put her through this. You can. Brandon will destroy me. Take my daughter. I can't. Jack's voice was firm but gentle. Sarah, if you don't fight now, he wins. And the next woman he targets won't have anyone to stand with her. You fight now, you protect her too. Sarah's hands shook. I'm scared. I know, fear's okay. Fear keeps you smart, but don't let it keep you silent. She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. A small movement, but enough. Jack's phone rang. Diana Torres, I'm early, already at the diner. Jack looked at Sarah. My lawyer's here, you ready to start fighting back? Sarah took a deep breath, let it out slowly. Yeah, I'm ready. And in that moment, in the parking lot of a rundown motel in a town owned by bad men, the war began. Diana Torres sat in the same corner booth where Jack's brothers had witnessed Brandon Kane's assault 36 hours earlier. Her laptop occupied half the table, files stacked beside it in precise columns that spoke to years of courtroom discipline. She wore a charcoal suit despite the early hour, her dark hair pulled back in a style that meant business before breakfast. Jack slid into the seat across from her. Sarah remained standing, hands clasped in front of her like a defendant awaiting verdict. Diana looked up. Her eyes moved from Jack to Sarah with the clinical assessment of someone trained to read people in crisis. She gestured to the empty space. Sit, please. We have work to do. Sarah sat. Her posture was rigid, shoulders drawn in, the physical manifestation of someone expecting another blow. Diana pulled a legal pad from her briefcase, clicked a pen. Her voice carried the crisp efficiency of someone who'd fought these battles before. Sarah Mitchell, age 32, single mother, works here as a waitress, lives in Desert View Trailer Park, Unit 47, owned by Kane Properties, LLC. Is that accurate? Sarah nodded. I need verbal confirmation for my notes. Yes, that's accurate. Diana wrote quickly. Brandon Kane assaulted you how many times prior to Tuesday night? The question landed like a punch. Sarah's face flushed. It wasn't assault before, just intimidation. Define intimidation. He'd come by my trailer, late at night, drunk, demanding rent I didn't have yet. He'd stand too close, say things about what I could do to make the rent go away. Diana's pen never stopped moving. Sexual harassment. How many incidents? 5, maybe 6 over the past 3 months. Did you report any of them? Sarah's laugh carried no humor. To who? His father's the mayor. The cops work for the Canes. Not all of them. Jack's voice was quiet but firm. Officer Daniels took statements Tuesday night. He gave me his direct line. Diana made another note. Daniels? Good. One clean cop is better than none. She looked at Sarah again. Tell me about Tuesday night. Everything. Start to finish. Sarah recounted the events in a voice that grew steadier as she progressed. Diana interrupted occasionally with questions that were precise and probing. What time did Brandon arrive? What were his exact words? Who witnessed what? Where were the security cameras? When Sarah finished, Diana sat back, studied her notes. Okay, here's our situation. Brandon Kane was arrested Tuesday night, charged with simple assault, made bail yesterday morning, $100,000 paid in cash by his father. He's currently under house arrest with ankle monitoring and a no-contact order. He made bail? Sarah's voice went hollow. He's out? With restrictions. He can't leave his residence except for legal meetings. Can't contact you or approach you. If he violates those terms, bail gets revoked. But he's out. Diana's expression softened slightly. Yes, the system isn't designed to keep rich men locked up pre-trial. It's designed to ensure they show up for trial. Unfortunately, bail is almost always granted unless someone's a demonstrated flight risk. Sarah's hands trembled. Jack reached across the table, placed his hand over hers, a gesture of solidarity more than comfort. Diana continued, however, we can use this. Every violation of the no-contact order strengthens our case. Every threat, every attempt at intimidation. Kane's lawyer, Oliver Strauss, very expensive, very good, will advise him to stay quiet and let the legal process play out. If Brandon's smart, he follows that advice. If he's not, he's not. Sarah's voice was flat. He'll come after me. He always does. Then we document everything. Build a case so airtight that even a Kane-friendly judge can't dismiss it. Diana pulled out another file. I've been researching Brandon Kane since Jack called. There are patterns, complaints filed and mysteriously dropped. Women who left town abruptly, 3 in the past 5 years. Jack leaned forward. 3 women? Jennifer Lawrence filed sexual harassment complaint in 2019, dropped it 2 weeks later and moved to California. Sarah Bennett, different Sarah, filed assault charges in 2020, dropped them, left for Oregon. Amy Rodriguez filed a complaint in 2021, never made it to court. She disappeared completely. Diana's eyes were hard. I can't find any trace of her after the complaint was withdrawn. The temperature in the diner seemed to drop. Jack's mind went to dark places, the kind of places he'd seen overseas. Bodies in shallow graves. Evidence that disappeared because money and power made it disappear. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. You think he killed her? I think it's a possibility we need to investigate. But right now, our focus is keeping you safe and building a case for your assault. Diana closed her laptop. The bail hearing is at 2 p.m. today. Judge Walsh is presiding. She's one of the few judges in Silver Ridge who isn't in Kane's pocket. We need to be there. We need to present evidence that Brandon is dangerous and his bail conditions should be strengthened. I can't go, Sarah's voice cracked. My jaw. The doctor said no stress, and I can't face him again. Not yet. Diana nodded. You don't have to. Jack and his brothers can testify as witnesses. I'll handle the legal arguments. But Sarah, at some point, you will have to face him. In court, under oath. Can you do that? Sarah looked at Jack. He saw the war happening behind her eyes. Fear versus rage versus the desperate need to protect her daughter. Finally, if it means he can't hurt anyone else, yes. The bail hearing took place in Silver Ridge Municipal Court, a limestone building that aspired to gravitas it couldn't quite achieve. The courtroom was small, 20 rows of gallery seating, a judge's bench that looked like it came from a furniture catalog, state and county flags flanking a seal that depicted mountains and optimism. Jack sat in the front row. Marcus, Jax, David, and Tommy filled the seats behind him. Officer Daniel sat near the back. In uniform, his presence a statement. Brandon Kane entered in a suit that probably cost more than Sarah's monthly rent. His father sat in the front row opposite Jack. Mayor Robert Kane, 60-something, silver hair styled to look distinguished. Eyes that assessed everyone in the courtroom with the cold calculation of a man who'd bought and owned people for decades. The mayor's gaze landed on Jack, held there for 3 long seconds. A message delivered without words. I know who you are. I know what you did. This won't end well for you. Jack stared back, unflinching, unafraid. The language of men who'd decided the cost of backing down was higher than the cost of fighting. Judge Walsh entered. Everyone rose. She was mid-50s, gray hair cut short, face that suggested she'd heard every lie and seen every manipulation the legal system had to offer. She sat, gestured for everyone else to do the same, opened the case file. Her voice carried the practiced neutrality of someone who'd spent years pretending the system was fair. The state versus Brandon Kane. Assault charges. Defendant has posted bail and is currently under house arrest. We're here to review bail conditions. Counselors, your positions? Oliver Strauss rose. His suit made Brandon's look cheap. His voice was smooth as aged whiskey. Your Honor, the state's bail conditions are excessive. My client has deep ties to this community. His entire family lives here. He has no criminal record. He's not a flight risk. House arrest is unnecessarily punitive for what amounts to a minor altercation. Diana stood. Your Honor, the state disagrees. Brandon Kane didn't engage in a minor altercation. He committed assault with clear intent to cause harm. Moreover, there are 3 prior complaints against Mr. Kane. Strauss interrupted. Complaints that were dropped, Your Honor. Not charges, not convictions. Complaints that were investigated and found to lack merit. Because the complainants were intimidated into withdrawing them. Diana's voice carried steel beneath the professional courtesy. The pattern is clear. Mr. Kane targets vulnerable women, uses his family's influence to escape consequences. We have witnesses who will testify. Biased witnesses. Strauss gestured toward Jack and his brothers. 5 men who, by their own admission, assaulted my client, who have inserted themselves into this situation despite having no connection to the alleged victim, whose testimony is colored by their own legal exposure. Judge Walsh held up a hand. Counselors, I'll hear from the witnesses. Mr. Reeves, please approach. Jack stood, walked to the witness stand. The bailiff swore him in. Jack placed his hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth, knowing that truth was about to become a weapon. Diana approached. Mr. Reeves, please describe what you witnessed on the night of the incident. Jack's voice was calm and precise. Military training made him an ideal witness. No embellishment, no emotion, just facts delivered with the weight of certainty. He described Brandon's entrance, his threats to Sarah, his physical assault. Described intervening only when Brandon became violent. Described Brandon's explicit threats about using his father's power to destroy Sarah. Strauss's cross-examination was aggressive. Mr. Reeves, you're not from Silver-Eyed, are you? No. In fact, you and your associates are transients, bikers passing through town. We're veterans. And we stayed because a woman needed help. How noble. Strauss's tone dripped sarcasm. Or perhaps you saw an opportunity. A vulnerable single mother. A chance to play hero. Maybe extract some gratitude? Jack's eyes went cold. Are you suggesting I'd exploit a woman in crisis for personal gain? I'm suggesting your motivations are suspect. My motivation is simple. I watched a man assault a woman. I intervened. That's what decent people do. Strauss tried another angle. You put your hands on my client. In defense of someone he was attacking. You have military training, combat experience. You could have killed him. If I wanted him dead, he'd be dead. Jack's voice was flat, matter of fact, the statement of someone who knew exactly what he was capable of. I used minimal force necessary to stop the assault. Your client is bruised. He's alive. That's restraint. The courtroom went quiet. Even Strauss paused, recalibrating his approach. Judge Walsh leaned forward. Mr. Reeves, did you witness Mr. Kane make threats against the victim? Yes, Your Honor. He threatened to evict her, threatened to have her daughter taken by child services, threatened to use his father's influence to destroy her life. And these threats were specific? Extremely specific. He mentioned his father by name, mentioned owning the police and judges, made it clear he believed he was above consequences. Walsh made notes. Thank you, Mr. Reeves. You may step down. Marcus Reed testified next, then Jax Chen, then Officer Daniels, whose testimony carried particular weight. Daniels described responding to the call, taking statements, witnessing Sarah's injuries and obvious trauma. Described Brandon's history, complaints that mysteriously vanished, witnesses who suddenly left town. Mayor Kane's face grew darker with each testimony. His lawyer whispered urgently in Brandon's ear. Brandon's expression shifted from smug confidence to barely contained rage. When the testimonies concluded, Judge Walsh reviewed her notes. The silence stretched. Jack could feel the tension, everyone waiting for a decision that would either validate the system or confirm its corruption. Finally, Walsh spoke. Bail will remain at $100,000. House arrest conditions will remain in effect. However, I'm adding additional stipulations. Mr. Kane will surrender his passport. He will have no contact, direct or indirect, with the victim or any witnesses. He will undergo random drug and alcohol testing. Any violation of these terms results in immediate bail revocation and remand to custody. Strauss started to object. Walsh cut him off. These conditions are lenient given the evidence presented. Your client should consider himself fortunate. Next hearing in 2 weeks to set trial date. We're adjourned. The gavel fell. Brandon Kane's face went purple. He turned to his father, voice rising despite his lawyer's attempts to quiet him. This is bullshit. You said you'd fix this. Mayor Kane's expression was stone. Not here, not now. But Brandon was beyond control. I'm not spending months locked in my house because some bitch. Brandon! The mayor's voice cracked like a whip. Shut up. Guards approached. Brandon's lawyer physically turned him toward the exit. But as he passed Jack's row, Brandon locked eyes with him. The hatred in that gaze was pure and simple and promised violence. Jack held the stare until Brandon was forced to look away. Outside the courthouse, Diana gathered Jack and his brothers in a huddle away from the press that had started to gather. Her voice was low and urgent. Okay, we won this round, but it's going to get worse before it gets better. How much worse? Marcus asked. The Canes don't lose, ever. They're going to come at us with everything. Diana pulled out her phone, showed them a text she'd received during the hearing. Unknown number. Drop this case or you'll regret it. This is from a burner phone, untraceable. But the message is clear. Jack's jaw tightened. You want to walk away? Hell no, but I want you all to understand what you're walking into. The Canes have been running this town for 30 years. They have judges, cops, politicians in their pocket. They'll use legal pressure, illegal pressure, whatever it takes. Let them come. Jack, I'm serious. They'll go after Sarah, after you, after anyone who stands with you. Are you prepared for that? Jack thought about Elena, about 10 years of regret and guilt and powerlessness, about the oath he'd sworn at her grave. Yes. That night, the war began in earnest. At 11:47 p.m., Marcus Reed's phone buzzed. Security alert from the motel where Sarah was staying. Someone had tried the door to her room. The motion-activated camera he'd installed caught a figure in dark clothes testing the lock, then retreating when the lights came on. Marcus was on watch. He'd been sitting in his truck in the parking lot, engine off, eyes on Sarah's door. He saw nothing, which meant whoever tried the door had come from the blind side, the small alley between the motel and the laundromat next door. He called Jack. We have a problem. Jack was there in 12 minutes. Reviewed the camera footage on Marcus's phone. The figure was careful, hood up, face obscured, gloved hands. Professional. Not some random burglar. They knocked on Sarah's door. She answered after the third knock, eyes heavy with sleep that evaporated when she saw their expressions. Jack kept his voice calm. Someone tried your door 20 minutes ago. Marcus scared them off, but I need to move you, now. Sarah's face went white. It's him, Brandon. Maybe, or someone he hired. Doesn't matter. Pack essentials. We're leaving in 5 minutes. Sarah woke her daughter, Sophie, that was her name. Jack remembered now. The girl was groggy but compliant, clutching her stuffed rabbit with one hand and her mother's shirt with the other. Children adapted, or they learned to pretend they did. They relocated to a different motel 15 miles outside Silver Ridge. This one was grittier, cheaper, the kind of place that catered to long-haul truckers and people with reasons to stay invisible. Jack paid cash for 2 rooms, set up his own security, motion sensors on doors and windows, cameras at angles that covered every approach. Sarah put Sophie back to bed, returned to the connecting door between the rooms where Jack was reviewing camera feeds on his laptop. Her voice was hollow. This is my life now? Running? Hiding? Until the trial, then it's over. You don't know that. Even if he goes to jail, his father's still out there. The family's still powerful. Jack looked up from the screen. Sarah, I know this is hard. I know it feels impossible, but if you run now, he wins. And the next woman he targets won't have anyone to stand with her. So I'm supposed to sacrifice my safety? My daughter's safety? For some hypothetical future victim? The question was fair, brutal, but fair. Jack had no good answer except the one he'd been living with for 10 years. I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you what happens if everyone who knows the truth stays silent. Evil wins, every time. Sarah sat on the edge of the bed, buried her face in her hands. When she looked up, her eyes were wet, but her voice was steady. Tell me the truth. Can we actually win this? Or are we just delaying the inevitable? I don't know. Jack's honesty felt like the only gift he could give her. The Canes have power, money, connections, but they're not invincible. Systems break. Corruption gets exposed. Sometimes the good guys actually win. Sometimes isn't exactly reassuring. No, but it's better than never. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then, okay, we stay, we fight, but Jack, if it gets too dangerous, if Sophie's at risk, I'm taking her and disappearing. Family first. I understand. At 3 a.m., Jack's phone buzzed again. This time it was Jack's Chen. Turn on the news, Channel 7. Jack found the remote, flipped to the local news station. A reporter stood in front of Rose's all-night diner. Behind her, flames consumed the building. Fire trucks pumped water uselessly at an inferno that had already won. The reporter's voice carried over the roar. Fire officials say the blaze started around 2:30 a.m. The cause is under investigation, but early reports suggest it may have been electrical. Fortunately, the diner was closed and no one was inside. However, this is a devastating loss for the community. Rose's All-Night Diner has been a Silver Ridge institution for over 30 years. The camera panned to show Fire Chief Thompson giving a statement. Jack recognized him from Diana's research, one of the officials on Mayor Kane's payroll. Thompson's words were careful and rehearsed. We're treating this as an accident pending full investigation. Old building, old wiring, these things happen. Jack turned off the TV, sat in the darkness, processing. The diner was where Brandon had assaulted Sarah, where the security cameras had captured everything, where the physical evidence existed. And now it was Ash. His phone rang. Diana Torres, her voice tight. Please tell me you have copies of that security footage. Officer Daniels submitted it as evidence. It should be in police custody. Should be, but Jack, the diner burning the same day as the bail hearing? That's not coincidence. That's message. Evidence is being destroyed. The footage is already submitted. Burning the building doesn't erase that. No, but it eliminates the crime scene, makes it harder to corroborate details, gives the defense room to argue the footage was doctored or taken out of context. Diana's frustration bled through the phone. This is how they operate. Death by 1,000 cuts. Destroy evidence, intimidate witnesses, make it too expensive and dangerous to pursue justice. Jack's grip on the phone tightened. What do? We adapt. I'll get certified copies of everything from Daniels. We document the arson. We make this part of the pattern, show the jury that evidence destruction indicates consciousness of guilt. A pause. Jack, be careful. They're escalating. First they try Sarah's door. Now they burn down the crime scene. Next step is direct violence. Jack ended the call, sat in the darkness, thinking. Marcus appeared in the doorway. I heard. What's the play? We need to find the other women. Jennifer Lawrence, Sarah Bennett. Get them to testify about their experiences with Brandon. Build a pattern the Kanes can't bury. And Amy Rodriguez, the one who disappeared? Jack's voice went cold. We find out what happened to her. And if what I think happened actually happened, Brandon Kane isn't looking at assault charges anymore. At 7 a.m., Jack gathered his brothers in his motel room, spread papers across both beds, research David had compiled overnight on Brandon Kane's previous accusers. David pointed to a printout. Jennifer Lawrence, age 28 at the time of complaint, worked as paralegal at Mitchell & Sons law firm downtown, filed sexual harassment complaint in November 2019. Withdrew it December 3rd, same year. 2 weeks later, moved to San Francisco. I found her on LinkedIn. Still there. Works for a tech company now. Contact information? Email and phone number. Want me to reach out? No, I will. Jack looked at the next file. Sarah Bennett, age 25 at complaint, bartender at the Silver Spur. Filed assault charges February 2020 after Brandon allegedly broke her arm during an altercation. Charges withdrawn March 1st. Relocated to Portland 3 days later. I found her through social media. She's married now, has a kid. And Amy Rodriguez? David's expression darkened. Dead end. Filed complaint June 2021. Complaint withdrawn July 2nd. Last known activity was a withdrawal from her bank account July 5th. $500 from an ATM in Silver Ridge. After that, nothing. No social media updates, no bank activity, no employment records, no tax filings. It's like she vanished. Did police file a missing persons report? No, her family filed one in September 2021. Police investigated, found no evidence of foul play, closed it as a voluntary disappearance. 28-year-old woman just decides to vanish without telling anyone, and that's considered normal. Jack studied the file. Amy Rodriguez's photo showed a young woman with dark hair and a bright smile. Someone's daughter. Someone's friend. Someone who'd made the mistake of saying no to Brandon Kane. Jack Chen's voice was quiet but firm. We need to find her, or find out what happened to her. Agreed, but carefully. If Brandon did kill her, we're talking about murder. That means evidence. Crime scene, body. Jack looked at his brothers. We're veterans, not cops. We need to bring in professionals. FBI, Tommy suggested. Not yet. We need probable cause before FBI gets interested. Right now, all we have is a missing person with a suspicious timeline. Jack pulled out his phone. But I know someone who might help. The call connected after 3 rings. Detective Chen? This is Jack Reeves. We met at my sister's funeral 10 years ago. The voice that answered carried the weight of a career spent seeing the worst of humanity. Jack Reeves, I remember. You were the brother who accused Marcus Webb of murder. Because he did murder her. Case was closed as suicide by multiple independent investigators. Investigators who didn't want to cross a cop. But that's not why I'm calling. I need advice on a missing person case. Silver Ridge, Nevada. Woman disappeared after filing complaint against mayor's son. Vanished completely. No trace. Chen was quiet for a moment. Then, Amy Rodriguez. I saw that case cross my desk last year. Silver Ridge PD closed it as voluntary disappearance. You investigated? Cross-referenced. I investigate patterns, Jack. Women who disappear after accusing powerful men. Amy Rodriguez fit the pattern, but Silver Ridge PD refused to cooperate with the outside investigation. Said it was closed. Said I was wasting resources on a woman who clearly wanted to start fresh somewhere. Did you believe them? No, but belief isn't evidence. And without cooperation from local authorities, I had no jurisdiction. Chen's voice took on a different quality, something that might have been respect or might have been warning. What's your interest in this? Jack explained. The assault on Sarah, Brandon's history, the pattern of complaints and disappearances, the diner burning down, the escalating intimidation. When he finished, Chen was quiet for so long Jack thought the connection had dropped. Finally, you're describing a serial predator with powerful protection. That's dangerous territory. I've seen good men die trying to take down men like that. I'm not a cop anymore. I don't have jurisdiction or chain of command. I can operate in gray areas you can't. That's called vigilantism. That's called doing what's necessary when the system fails. Another long pause. Then, I can't officially help you, but unofficially, if you find evidence of a crime, if you document everything properly, if you build a case that even corrupt cops can't ignore, I know people at FBI who specialize in corruption cases, people who don't care about small-town politics. That's what I needed to hear. Jack, one more thing. Be careful. If Brandon Kane killed Amy Rodriguez, he's already crossed a line most people don't cross. He won't hesitate to cross it again. Jack ended the call, looked at his brothers. We need to find Amy Rodriguez, or at least find out what happened to her. Where do we start? Marcus asked. With the last people who saw her alive. The research took 2 days. David worked his digital magic, tracing Amy Rodriguez's last known movements through bank records, social media posts, cell phone pings before the account went dark. The picture that emerged was chilling in its banality. Amy had worked as a housekeeper at Kane Properties. She'd filed her complaint after Brandon had cornered her in an empty rental unit and assaulted her. She'd withdrawn the complaint after receiving threats. She'd stayed in town another month, presumably because she needed the job and couldn't afford to flee. Then on July 5, 2021, she'd withdrawn $500 from an ATM. Her phone had pinged off a cell tower on the outskirts of Silver Ridge. Then nothing. David pulled up a map on his laptop. Last ping was here. Desert Highway 375. Middle of nowhere. Nearest town is 30 miles away. Jack studied the map. The highway cut through empty desert, the kind of landscape where a person could disappear and no one would notice, where a body could be buried and remain hidden for decades. We need to drive that route. Look for anything unusual. Turnoffs, abandoned buildings, anywhere someone might dump a body. Tommy Sullivan spoke up. That's a lot of empty desert. Could take weeks to search properly. Then we take weeks. But before they could organize the search, events accelerated. On the third night after the bail hearing, at 2:17 a.m., Jack's motion sensors triggered. Someone was approaching the motel. Multiple someones based on the heat signatures his military-grade sensors were picking up. Jack was up and armed in seconds. Woke Marcus through the connecting door with a hand signal. Positioned himself by the window with his sidearm, legally carried, properly licensed, but he'd hoped he wouldn't need it. 3 vehicles pulled into the parking lot. No lights, engines off, doors opening with practiced quiet. 6 men emerged, all large, all moving with the coordination of people who'd done this before. 2 headed for Sarah's room. 3 approached Jack's position. 1 hung back by the vehicle's lookout or getaway driver. Jack's tactical assessment was automatic. Weapons unknown, intent clear, threat level extreme. He called 911. Kept his voice low. Armed men approaching motel room, Red Rock Motor Lodge, Highway 50, room 217, multiple suspects. Send officers immediately. The dispatcher's response was professional but unhurried. Sir, can you describe the situation? 6 armed men attempting to break into occupied room. This is witness intimidation related to Kane assault case. We need officers now. The mention of Kane's name changed the dispatcher's tone. Sir, stay on the line. I'm dispatching units. But Jack knew small-town response times. Knew the nearest patrol car was probably 15 minutes away. Knew that was 14 minutes too long. The men reached Sarah's door. One pulled out tools, lockpicks or something more advanced. The other stood watch. Jack made a decision. He opened his door, stepped into the walkway. His weapon was visible but not raised, a statement of capability without escalation. His voice carried across the parking lot. You gentlemen are trespassing. I've called police. I suggest you leave. The men froze, turned, assessed. Jack saw their calculations. 1 man with a gun versus 6 of them. They liked those odds. The one who appeared to be the leader stepped forward. Big guy, 6'3", 240, moving with the stiff gait of someone who'd spent years building muscle at the expense of flexibility. His voice was rough. This doesn't concern you. Walk away. Can't do that. Then you're going to have a problem. I've had problems before. Usually I solve them. Behind Jack, his brothers emerged from their rooms. 4 more armed men. The odds shifted. The leader's expression changed. This was supposed to be easy. Scare some witnesses, send a message, get out clean. Now it was 6 against 5, and the 5 looked like they'd spent years learning how to make 6 into 0. We can do this the easy way or the hard way, the leader said. There's also the smart way, Jack replied. The one where you leave before the cops arrive, and we all avoid a lot of paperwork. We're just delivering a message. Message received, now leave. The leader looked at his crew, looked at Jack and his brothers, did the math again, came to the same conclusion. This wasn't worth the risk. He gestured to his men. They retreated to their vehicles. Engines started. Lights came on. They pulled out of the parking lot at normal speed. No rush, no panic, just professionals recognizing when a job had gone sideways. Marcus lowered his weapon. That was Kane's crew? Probably, or hired muscle, doesn't matter. They'll be back. Sarah emerged from her room, Sophie clutching her leg. Her face was pale, but her voice was steady. They came for me. They came to scare you. They failed. What happens when they try again? We make sure they don't. Jack holstered his weapon. Pack your things. We're moving you again, somewhere they can't find. Where? Montana. I have a cabin. Off-grid. No neighbors for 5 miles. Safe. Sarah looked at her daughter, at Jack, at the dark parking lot where 6 men had just tried to break down her door. How long? Until trial. 2 months, maybe 3. I have a job. Sophie has school. I can't just disappear. Diana Torres appeared from her own room 3 doors down. She'd stayed in Silver Ridge to coordinate the legal strategy. Her voice carried the steel of someone who'd made impossible decisions before. Sarah, if you stay here, you're at risk. They just escalated to direct violence. Next time it might not be intimidation. It might be elimination. Elimination? Sophie's voice was small and frightened. What does that mean? Sarah knelt down, pulled her daughter close. It means we're going on an adventure, like camping. Would you like that? Sophie looked uncertain but nodded. Jack's phone buzzed. Officer Daniels, got your 911 call, en route, ETA 8 minutes. Did anyone get hurt? Jack typed back. No, suspects fled before contact. Need statement? Daniels, yes, I'll be there in 5. Daniels arrived in 4 minutes, took statements, reviewed the security footage Marcus had captured. His expression grew darker with each frame. When he finished, he pulled Jack aside. His voice was low and urgent. I recognized 2 of those men. Raymond Porter, former cop, got fired from Denver PD for excessive force. Now he works private security for Kane Properties. The other one is Carl Mitchell, local muscle. If they're involved, Mayor Kane ordered this. Can you prove it? Not yet, but Jack, this means you're a direct threat to them. They're not trying to scare you anymore. They're trying to eliminate you. Let them try. Daniels grabbed Jack's arm. His grip was firm, his eyes serious. I'm not joking. The Kanes don't play games. If you're a problem they can't solve legally, they'll solve it illegally. You need to be very, very careful. I appreciate the warning. Do you? Because Elena Reeves thought she could fight back too. And she ended up dead. The mention of Elena's name hit like a physical blow. Jack's expression went cold. That's exactly why I'm not backing down. Because men like Marcus Webb and Brandon Kane keep winning when good people back down. I'm done backing down. Daniels released his grip, nodded slowly. Okay, but at least let me help. I'll put in for extra patrols. I'll document everything. And if you find evidence of a crime, any crime, you bring it to me, not to the department, to me personally, because I'm tired of watching these bastards get away with everything. Why are you helping? You could lose your job. I've got 23 years on the force. I'm 2 years from retirement. My pension's secure, and I'd rather go out doing the right thing than spend my last 2 years protecting corrupt politicians. Daniels pulled out a card, wrote a number on the back. That's my cell. Call anytime, day or night. I mean it. Jack took the card. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just help me put Brandon Kane in prison where he belongs. At dawn, they caravanned north. 2 vehicles, Marcus's truck carrying Sarah and Sophie, Jack's pickup following with their gear. Jax, David, and Tommy stayed behind to continue investigating. The drive to Montana would take 12 hours. Long enough for Jack to think. Long enough for doubt to creep in. Was he doing the right thing? Uprooting this woman and her child, hiding them away, turning their lives into a military operation? Or was he projecting his own need for redemption onto someone who just wanted to survive? Sarah's voice broke his thoughts. Jack, can I ask you something? They'd stopped for gas in Idaho. Sophie was inside buying snacks with money Marcus had given her. Sarah stood by the pump, exhaustion etched into every line of her face. Yeah. Do you think we'll win? Really? Jack considered lying, considered offering false hope, but Sarah deserved truth. I don't know. The Kanes have been running Silver Ridge for 30 years. They have money, power, and no conscience. The system is designed to protect people like them. He paused. But systems break. Corruption gets exposed. Sometimes, not often, but sometimes the good guys win. And if we don't win, then I make sure you and Sophie disappear somewhere they can never find you. New identities, new state, fresh start. You'll be safe even if justice fails. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. You'd do that? Even though it means Brandon goes free? I'd rather you alive and him unpunished than you dead and him in prison. That's not justice. No, but it's survival, and survival is better than the alternative. Sarah looked toward the convenience store where her daughter was visible through the window, carefully selecting candy bars with the seriousness of a 6-year-old making life-altering decisions. She deserves better than this, better than running and hiding, better than a mother who's too scared to fight back. You are fighting back. That takes more courage than running. Doesn't feel courageous, feels terrifying. Courage usually does. They reached Jack's cabin as the sun was setting. The structure sat at the end of a dirt road that wound through pine forest for 3 miles. No power lines, no neighbors. Just wilderness and silence. Sarah stepped out of the truck, looked around. You weren't kidding about off-grid. Solar panels for electricity, well for water, propane for heat. Everything you need, nothing you don't. Sophie emerged, eyes wide. Do you have bears? Sometimes, but they're more scared of you than you are of them. I'm not scared of bears, Jack smiled. Children's fearlessness. Or maybe children's inability to recognize what should scare them. Good, because bears are the least dangerous thing out here. They settled in. Jack showed them the cabin's layout. 2 bedrooms, small kitchen, bathroom with a composting toilet that he didn't bother explaining because 6-year-olds didn't need those details. Marcus helped unload their belongings. By nightfall, the cabin felt less like a hideout and more like a temporary home. After Sophie went to bed, Jack and Marcus sat on the porch. The Montana night was cold and clear. Stars burned overhead with the intensity that only came in places far from cities. Marcus broke the silence. You know this can't last forever. I know. Eventually she has to go back. Face trial, testify. You can't protect her forever. I can protect her long enough. Long enough for what? Long enough to find evidence that even the Canes can't bury. Long enough to build a case so airtight that corrupt judges can't dismiss it. Long enough to prove Brandon Kane is a monster. And if we can't, Jack looked at his brother, then I keep my promise. Sarah and Sophie disappear. New lives. Clean break. They live. Marcus nodded slowly. You're getting attached. I'm doing what needs to be done. That's not what I said. Jack didn't respond. Because Marcus was right. He was getting attached. Attached to Sarah's quiet strength. Attached to Sophie's resilient spirit. Attached to the idea that maybe this time he could save someone. Maybe this time the oath he'd sworn at Elena's grave wouldn't be broken. His phone buzzed. Text from Jax. Found something. You need to see this. Call when you can. Jack stepped off the porch, dialed. Jax answered on the first ring. We interviewed the ATM security guard, the one from Rodriguez's last withdrawal. Jax's voice was tight. She remembers Amy. Says she looked scared. Says there was a vehicle following her. Dark SUV, expensive. Kane Properties logo on the side. Jack's blood went cold. You get this on record? Recorded statement. Witness is willing to testify. Jack, this links Brandon directly to Amy's disappearance. If we can find the body, we have him for murder. Any idea where they took her? Working on it. David's pulling cell tower data. But there's something else. We found 2 more missing women, same pattern, same timeline. Complaints filed against Brandon. Complaints withdrawn. Women disappeared shortly after. Jack closed his eyes, felt the weight of it. Not 1 murder, not 2, potentially 4 or more. Brandon Kane wasn't just an abuser, he was a serial killer. And his father had been covering it up for years. Names? Melissa Torres, disappeared 2018. Christina Hayes, disappeared 2020. Both filed complaints against Brandon. Both vanished without a trace after complaints were withdrawn. Jesus Christ. Yeah, we're not fighting an assault case anymore, Jack. We're fighting a serial murder case. And if we expose this, the Canes will stop at nothing to silence us. Jack looked back at the cabin, saw the light in the window where Sarah was probably checking on her sleeping daughter. Thought about what would happen if the Canes decided to eliminate everyone who knew the truth. Then we work fast, find the bodies, build the case, get it to the FBI before the Canes can bury it. And if they come for us first, then we make sure Sarah and Sophie are safe, and we make sure the evidence gets out even if we don't. Jack ended the call, stood in the Montana darkness, listened to the wind through pine trees, felt the weight of decisions that couldn't be unmade. He'd sworn to protect Sarah, sworn to seek justice, but those 2 oaths might be incompatible, because seeking justice meant exposing Brandon Kane as a serial killer. And exposing a serial killer meant painting targets on everyone involved. Sarah appeared on the porch. Everything okay? No, but it will be. You're a terrible liar. Jack managed a smile. Yeah, I know. Sarah came down the steps, stood beside him. Her voice was quiet. It's worse than assault, isn't it? Whatever your brother found. Yeah. How much worse? Jack considered not telling her, considered protecting her from the full truth, but she deserved to know, deserved to understand exactly what they were up against. We think Brandon killed at least 3 women, maybe more. Women who tried to fight back, who filed complaints, who threatened to expose him. Sarah's face went pale in the starlight. And you think I could be next? Not while I'm here, not while my brothers are watching. But Sarah, this changes everything. We're not just fighting assault charges anymore. We're fighting someone who's willing to kill to protect his secrets. Then maybe we should stop, take your offer, new identities, disappear. Is that what you want? Sarah was quiet for a long time. Then, what I want is for my daughter to grow up in a world where monsters face consequences, where power doesn't mean immunity, where saying no doesn't mean dying. She looked at Jack. But I also want her to grow up, period. And if fighting means risking her life, then we make sure there's no risk. We keep you safe while we build the case. We don't let you become a target. How? How do you keep someone safe from a serial killer with unlimited resources? Jack thought about Afghanistan, about protecting assets in hostile territory, about the mathematics of security when the threat was everywhere and nowhere. By being smarter than him, by documenting everything, by making sure enough people know the truth that killing us doesn't solve his problem. He paused, and by being willing to do what he's not expecting, which is going public, making this so loud that the Canes can't bury it, turning you from a vulnerable witness into a voice that can't be silenced. Sarah shook her head. I can't do that. I can't be some public figure. I just want to survive. I know, but survival and justice might be the same thing. Because if we stay quiet, if we hide, Brandon goes free. And the next woman he targets won't have anyone to warn her. That's not my responsibility. No, but it could be your choice. Sarah wrapped her arms around herself. The Montana cold was seeping through her jacket. I need to think about it, about all of it. Take your time. We've got weeks before trial. You don't have to decide tonight. But even as he said it, Jack knew time was the one thing they didn't have. The Canes were escalating. Evidence was being destroyed. Witnesses were being intimidated. And somewhere in the Nevada desert, 3 bodies waited to be found. The race was on, and Jack wasn't sure they could win. Part 3, The Reckoning. 6 months transformed everything except the essential truth. Brandon Cain remained dangerous, and the women he'd hurt remained haunted. Jack stood in the bathroom of his Montana cabin, razor in hand, watching gray infiltrate the dark stubble along his jaw. The mirror showed a man who'd aged more in half a year than in the previous decade. Lines bracketed his mouth where there'd been none before. The scar through his eyebrows seemed deeper, more pronounced. Or maybe he was just noticing it more. Behind him, through the open door, he could hear Sophie's laughter mixing with Sarah's voice. The sound was normal, domestic, the kind of ordinary that felt extraordinary after months of living like targets in a war zone. Marcus appeared in the doorway. Diana called. Trial starts Monday. Judge Walsh is holding firm. No more delays. Jack rinsed the razor. The water ran pink then clear. Sarah ready? She says she is. But you know how it goes. Nobody's ready to face their abuser in court until they're actually doing it. Then we make sure she knows we're there. Every second, no matter what happens. Marcus leaned against the doorframe. 6 months of Montana winter had softened some of his edges. He'd grown his beard longer, traded tactical gear for flannel, started smiling more often. But his eyes still held the alertness of a man who'd spent too many years learning that complacency meant death. You thought about what happens after, when this is done? One thing at a time. That's not an answer. Jack met his brother's gaze in the mirror. I don't have an answer. We win. Brandon goes to prison. Sarah's safe. We lose. I get her and Sophie out of the country. Beyond that, you've been playing house with a woman you're not married to and a kid who calls you Jack when she means dad. The observation landed harder than Marcus probably intended. Jack set down the razor, turned to face him directly. What's your point? My point is, you're in deep. Deeper than you've been with anyone since Elena died. And I'm asking if you've thought about what that means long term. Marcus, Because Sarah's thinking about it. I see the way she looks at you, the way she relaxes when you're around, the way Sophie reaches for your hand before she reaches for hers. You've become their person, Jack. And when this trial ends, they're going to need to know if you're staying or if this was just a mission. Jack wanted to argue, wanted to say Marcus was reading too much into proximity and circumstance, but the truth was more complicated and more simple. He'd fallen in love with both of them, with Sarah's quiet strength that masked steel beneath, with Sophie's resilience that reminded him children could survive anything if someone stood between them and the darkness. The realization wasn't new, just unexamined. Easier to focus on the immediate threat than the long-term implications of building a life with two people who'd been strangers half a year ago. I'm staying, Jack heard himself say. After the trial, whatever happens, I'm staying. Marcus nodded once. Good, because they need you. And brother, I think you need them too. The conversation ended there. Some truths didn't require elaboration. Breakfast was pancakes and coffee strong enough to strip paint. Sophie sat at the table with a coloring book, her tongue between her teeth in concentration. She was working on a picture of a house, not the trailer she'd lived in before, but something bigger. Something with a herd and a tree and 5 stick figures holding hands in front. She'd labeled them in careful first-grade handwriting. Mama, Jack, Sophie, Uncle Marcus, Uncle Jack's. Sarah noticed Jack staring at the drawing. She made one for everyone, gave them out like Christmas cards last week. What am I supposed to do with a picture of stick figures? Frame it, put it on your fridge. Cry a little when you think about how much she loves you. Sarah's voice was light, but her eyes were serious. She's attached, Jack. You know that, right? Marcus mentioned it. And I'm not going anywhere. Sarah's shoulders dropped, a release of tension Jack hadn't realized she was carrying. Good, because I don't think I can do this without you. You could. You're stronger than you think. Maybe, but I'd rather not test that theory. She poured more coffee. Her hands were steady now. The tremor that had been constant in those first weeks had faded. Physical manifestation of healing that was psychological as much as physiological. Diana sent the trial schedule. I'm testifying on day 3. I'll be front row. You look at me when it gets hard. Remember, you're not alone. What if I freeze? What if I can't say the words? Then Diana asks yes or no questions. Then we play the security footage. Then my brothers testify. There's backup plans for the backup plans. Jack moved closer, kept his voice gentle. But you won't freeze. You'll stand up there and tell the truth. Because that's who you've become. Who I've become, Sarah's smile was rueful. 6 months ago, I was a waitress who couldn't pay rent. Now I'm, what? A professional victim? A survivor. There's a difference. Sophie looked up from her coloring. Mama, are we going back to Silver Ridge? The question hung in the air. Sarah glanced at Jack. He nodded. They discussed this, agreed on how to handle it. Sarah knelt beside her daughter's chair. Yes, baby. We're going back for a little while. For something called a trial. It's where we tell a judge what happened, so the bad man can't hurt anyone else. Will the bad man be there? Yes. I don't want to see him. You won't have to. You'll stay with Uncle Jack's. He'll take you to the park, get you ice cream, keep you safe. Mama has to be there, but you don't. Sophie considered this, then, will Jack keep you safe? Yes. Okay then. She returned to her coloring as if the matter was settled. Children's logic. If the adults you trust say it's okay, then it's okay. No need for complicated emotional processing. Jack wished adult brains worked the same way. They left Montana on Sunday morning. 2 vehicles, Jack's truck with Sarah and Sophie, Marcus following with Diana Torres, who'd flown in the night before. The drive back to Nevada felt longer than the drive away had been. Every mile closer to Silver Ridge increased the tension in Sarah's shoulders, the tightness around her eyes. Sophie fell asleep an hour in, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Sarah watched the landscape roll past, silent except for occasional directions when the GPS lost signal. Jack didn't push conversation. Sometimes silence was its own comfort. They reached Silver Ridge at sunset. The town looked the same. Tired buildings, empty streets, The weight of corruption so normalized it was invisible unless you knew to look for it. But something had shifted. Campaign signs dotted yards. Recall Mayor Kane. New leadership for Silver Ridge. Justice, not politics. Sarah noticed them too. Diana's media campaign worked. Looks like it. Public pressure's a hell of a motivator. They'd spent 4 of the 6 months building that pressure. Diana had coordinated interviews with national news outlets. The story of a small-town mayor covering up his son's crimes had gained traction, especially when David Torres leaked documents showing the financial connections between the Kane family and local officials. Mayor Kane's approval rating had collapsed from 60% to 23%. His political career was over regardless of the trial's outcome. But Brandon was the prize. Brandon was the one who'd hurt Sarah, who'd killed Amy Rodriguez and Melissa Torres and Christina Hayes. Brandon was the one who needed to pay in ways that mattered, with freedom, with years, with the rest of his life. The prosecution had found the bodies 3 months ago. Amy Rodriguez had been buried in the desert 30 miles outside town, exactly where the cell tower data suggested. Melissa Torres was found 2 miles away. Christina Hayes was further out, in a ravine that would have hidden her forever if dogs hadn't picked up the scent. All 3 showed signs of strangulation. All 3 had been dead roughly as long as they'd been missing. And all 3 had trace evidence linking them to Brandon Kane. Fibers from his vehicle, DNA under fingernails, cellular data placing his phone at the burial sites. The forensics were airtight. The testimony was devastating. The case was as close to unbeatable as criminal cases got. But Jack had learned not to trust certainty. Had learned that powerful men had ways of escaping justice even when justice seemed inevitable. They checked into a hotel under assumed names, Diana's precaution against last-minute intimidation. Separate rooms on the same floor. Jack did a security sweep, checking sight lines and exit routes and the dozen other things that had become automatic over 6 months of living like fugitives. When he finished, he found Sarah standing at her window, looking down at the street below. Her reflection in the glass showed someone different from the frightened waitress he'd met in that diner. This woman stood straighter, held herself with the posture of someone who'd survived and knew it. "Tomorrow it starts," she said without turning around. "Tomorrow it starts. I keep thinking about the other women, the ones who didn't make it. How if this trial had happened 3 years ago, they'd still be alive. You can't think like that. Can't carry a responsibility for things that happened before you were involved. But I can make sure it doesn't happen again. That's what this is about, right? Not just justice for me, justice for them too." Jack moved to stand beside her. The street below was quiet except for a few cars passing through. Normal Sunday night in a town that wasn't normal at all. You're doing this for all the right reasons. That matters. Does it? Because right now it feels selfish. Like I'm putting everyone at risk. You, your brothers, Diana, Officer Daniels, just so I can get closure. It's not selfish to want accountability. It's not selfish to make sure a serial killer faces consequences. Jack's voice was firm. "And Sarah, we're not at risk because of you. We're here because we choose to be, because this is worth fighting for." Sarah turned from the window. Her eyes were wet but clear. "Thank you for everything, for believing me when no one else did, for protecting me and Sophie, for giving us a chance at normal. You don't have to thank me." "Yes, I do, because you could have walked away, could have decided it wasn't your problem. But you didn't." She stepped closer. Close enough that Jack could smell her shampoo, something floral he'd gotten used to over months of proximity. "Jack, when this is over..." A knock interrupted. Sophie's voice through the door. "Mama, I'm hungry." The moment broke. Sarah smiled, rueful and resigned. Duty calls. They ordered room service, spent the evening watching cartoons that Sophie loved and adults tolerated. Normal domestic routine in abnormal circumstances. Jack found himself studying them. The way Sophie leaned against her mother's side, the way Sarah's hand absently stroked her daughter's hair, the way both of them seemed more solid than they'd been half a year ago. Healing wasn't linear, wasn't simple, but it was visible if you knew to look for it. At 9, Sophie went to bed. Sarah stayed in the connecting room with her. Jack took first watch in the hallway, sitting in a chair positioned to see all approaches. Marcus would relieve him at midnight. The hotel corridor was silent except for the ambient hum of ice machines and distant televisions. Jack's mind drifted to the trial, to testimony he'd have to give, to watching Sarah face Brandon across a courtroom, to the possibility that despite everything, the system might still fail. His phone buzzed. Text from Diana. Prosecution just sent final witness list. They're calling Porter. He flipped. Jack's pulse quickened. Raymond Porter, the enforcer who tried breaking into Sarah's motel room, who'd worked for the Canes for years. If he'd agreed to testify, it meant immunity deal. Meant prosecution had enough on him that he'd chosen cooperation over loyalty. Jack typed back, "What's he giving them?" Diana's response came quickly. "Everything, burial locations, Kane's direct orders, financial records. He's been documenting for insurance." Jack, this case just became unlosable. Nothing was unlosable. But Porter's testimony would eliminate any reasonable doubt, would connect Mayor Kane directly to the cover-up, would show premeditation and pattern and consciousness of guilt. Another text. Also, media's camped outside courthouse. This is national news now. Sarah needs to be prepared for that. Jack rubbed his eyes. Fame was a double-edged sword. Public attention meant the Canes couldn't make witnesses disappear quietly, but it also meant Sarah's trauma would be dissected by strangers, her life examined by people who didn't know her pain commodified for clicks and ratings. At midnight, Marcus appeared. They exchanged positions without words, just a nod, a hand clasp, the silent language of men who'd done this dance before. Jack returned to his room, lay on the bed fully clothed, stared at the ceiling, thought about tomorrow, about justice and accountability and the space between what should happen and what actually does. Sleep came eventually, but the dreams were dark. Elena's face mixing with Amy Rodriguez's, Marcus Webb's voice mixing with Brandon Kane's, the past bleeding into the present until Jack couldn't tell which ghosts were which. He woke at 6 to Marcus knocking. Time to prepare for war. The courthouse steps were packed with journalists, cameras, activists, holding signs demanding justice. Officer Daniels met them at a side entrance, ushering them through security with the efficiency of someone who'd planned for this moment. Inside, the building hummed with controlled chaos. Lawyers conferring in clusters, witnesses waiting in designated areas, court staff moving with the purposeful urgency of people who knew the world was watching. Judge Walsh's courtroom was larger than Jack expected. 200 seats, most already occupied despite the early hour. He spotted Mayor Kane in the front row of the defense side, thinner than 6 months ago, gray hair more white now, face carrying the weight of a man watching his empire crumble. Brandon Kane sat at the defense table in a suit that couldn't hide the institutional pallor he'd acquired during months in county jail. He'd lost weight, gained hard edges, but his eyes still held that entitled certainty, the look of someone who believed money and power would save him even now. Oliver Strauss sat beside him, reviewing documents with the meticulous focus of a lawyer who knew his client was guilty but was being paid too much to care. The prosecution table held District Attorney Morrison, different from the Morrison who'd responded to the diner that night, and 2 assistant prosecutors Jack didn't recognize. Diana sat behind them as counsel for Sarah, technically not part of the criminal case but present as victim's advocate. Sarah entered with Jack's chin. She wore a navy dress Diana had selected, professional, modest, projecting competence without flash. Her hair was pulled back, minimal makeup, the appearance of someone who had nothing to hide and everything to lose. Brandon's eyes tracked her across the courtroom. Jack saw the calculation there, measuring, assessing, planning something Jack couldn't quite identify. Judge Walsh entered. Everyone rose. The bailiff's voice carried ritual weight. All rise. The Superior Court of Silver Ridge County is now in session, the Honorable Margaret Walsh presiding. Walsh settled into her chair, surveyed the packed gallery with the expression of someone who'd seen media circuses before and wasn't impressed. Be seated, but we're here for the matter of State of Nevada versus Brandon Kane. Murder in the first degree, 3 counts. Assault with intent to cause bodily harm. Witness intimidation. Are counsel ready to proceed? Morrison stood. The state is ready, Your Honor. Strauss rose with the fluid grace of expensive legal training. Defense is ready, Your Honor. Very well, Mr. Morrison, your opening statement. Morrison approached the jury box. 12 faces looked back at him. 8 women, 4 men, ranging from early 20s to late 60s. Diana had fought for that composition during selection, had used every challenge to ensure women were overrepresented, knowing they'd understand viscerally what men might only grasp intellectually. Morrison's voice was measured and clear. Ladies and gentlemen, over the next 2 weeks you're going to hear a story about power and abuse and murder, about a man who believed his family's wealth placed him above the law, about women who tried to speak out and paid for it with their lives. He gestured toward Brandon. The defendant, Brandon Kane, is charged with murdering 3 women: Amy Rodriguez, Melissa Torres, Christina Hayes. All 3 women had accused him of assault or harassment. All 3 withdrew their complaints after being threatened. All 3 disappeared shortly after. And all 3 were found buried in the Nevada desert with evidence linking them directly to Mr. Kane. Morrison moved along the jury box, making eye contact with each juror. The evidence will show a pattern, a cycle of violence that repeated because no one stopped it. Women would complain. The Kane family would use their influence to make those complaints disappear. And when a woman wouldn't stay silent, when she threatened to expose the truth, Mr. Kane would ensure her permanent silence. He paused, let the words settle. You'll hear from witnesses who saw Mr. Kane's violence firsthand, from law enforcement who documented his crimes, from forensic experts who connected physical evidence to the defendant, and you'll hear from a survivor, a woman who was assaulted by Mr. Kane but lived to tell her story, a woman who had the courage to stand up when others were silenced. Morrison's voice took on intensity. The defense will try to create doubt, will suggest alternative explanations, will attack the credibility of witnesses. That's their job. But when you've heard all the evidence, when you've seen the pattern and the proof in the defendant's own words, you'll know beyond any reasonable doubt that Brandon Kane is guilty of murder, and you'll have the power to ensure he faces justice. He returned to his seat. Strauss immediately stood. Oliver Strauss had the presence of a man who'd won unwinnable cases before and expected to do so again. His opening was masterful, acknowledging the tragedy of 3 dead women while subtly shifting blame away from his client. No one disputes that 3 women died. No one disputes that's a tragedy, but tragedy doesn't equal murder. And the prosecution's story, while emotionally compelling, is built on circumstantial evidence and assumptions. He moved with controlled energy. Yes, these women filed complaints against my client. Yes, those complaints were withdrawn. But withdrawn complaints don't indicate guilt. They indicate that after investigation, the claims were found to lack merit. Women change their minds. Women make false accusations. That's uncomfortable to acknowledge, but it's reality. Jack's hands clenched. Sarah's face had gone pale. Diana touched her arm, a gesture of support and restraint. Strauss continued, the prosecution will present forensic evidence, but forensic evidence can be planted, can be contaminated, can be misinterpreted by experts with agendas. You'll hear from our own experts who will cast serious doubt on the state's forensic conclusions. He approached the jury box, lowered his voice to something almost intimate. My client comes from a prominent family. That makes him a target, makes him someone people want to take down. And in the rush to find someone to blame for these tragedies, the real killer may be walking free while an innocent man sits in jail. The opening statements set the battle lines. Prosecution building a narrative of power and murder. Defense creating alternative possibilities and reasonable doubt. Jury caught in the middle, trying to determine truth from competing versions of reality. Day 1 continued with procedural testimony. The medical examiner who'd performed autopsies on all 3 victims. His testimony was clinical and devastating. Descriptions of ligature marks, crushed tracheas, evidence of struggle before death. Photos projected on screens showed what strangulation did to human bodies. Several jurors looked away. Strauss's cross-examination focused on time of death estimates. Doctor, you've stated that based on decomposition, Ms. Rodriguez died between July 5th and July 7th, 2021. That's a 48-hour window, correct? Correct. And during those 48 hours, my client has documented alibis for over 36 of them. Work schedules, Credit card receipts, security footage. He was seen by dozens of people. I can't speak to alibis. I can only speak to cause and time of death. Of course, but if Mr. Kane can prove he was elsewhere during most of the probable death window, that creates doubt about his involvement, doesn't it? It might, if the alibi evidence is credible. We'll let the jury decide credibility. The exchange set the pattern, prosecution building evidence, defense chipping away at certainty, death by 1,000 cuts. The strategy of expensive lawyers with guilty clients. Day 2 brought forensic testimony. DNA expert explaining how skin cells under Amy Rodriguez's fingernails matched Brandon Kane. Fiber analysis showing how threads from Brandon's vehicle were found on all 3 victims. Cell tower specialists presenting data that placed Brandon's phone at the burial sites within hours of each woman's disappearance. Strauss attacked each expert's methodology. Suggested contamination. Questioned chain of custody. Raised the specter of planted evidence and police misconduct. Never directly accusing, always implying. Creating small doubts that might accumulate into reasonable doubt. Jack watched the jury, watched their faces as evidence mounted. Some seemed convinced already. Others looked uncertain. The 4 men in particular seemed receptive to Strauss's alternative theories. During a recess, Diana pulled Jack and Sarah aside. "It's going well. Jury's engaged. Prosecution's case is solid. But," Sarah heard the hesitation, "but Strauss is good. He's creating openings." And the jury's male members look skeptical. "We need them convinced, not just the women." "What about Porter's testimony? That's tomorrow, right?" "Yes, and it should seal the case. Direct testimony from someone who helped Brandon commit crimes, who can describe the cover-up from inside. It's devastating for the defense." Jack's instinct prickled. Unless Strauss has something we don't know about. Some way to discredit Porter before he testifies. Porter's solid. He's been in protective custody. The deal's done. He testifies or he goes to prison himself. Then why do I feel like we're missing something? Diana had no answer, just unease that matched Jack's own. Day 3 began with Raymond Porter on the stand. The former cop looked smaller than he had 6 months ago. Institutional weight loss, prison pallor, the diminishment that came from betraying powerful people and knowing there was no going back. Morrison's direct examination was methodical. Porter described years working for the Kanes, described threats he'd delivered, witnesses he'd intimidated, evidence he'd helped destroy. Described the night Mayor Kane had called him with GPS coordinates and instructions. "Dig here, bury this, tell no one." Porter's voice was flat, effectless. I asked him what I was burying. He said I didn't want to know, but I looked, saw the body, young woman, Hispanic, bruising around her neck. I knew what it was, knew what I was doing. But I did it anyway because that's what they paid me for. And this happened more than once. 3 times, 3 different bodies, 3 different locations. Always the same pattern. Mayor Kane would call, give me coordinates, tell me to clean up his son's mess. Morrison introduced photos, Porter at ATMs corresponding to the exact dates Amy Rodriguez and the others had withdrawn final cash amounts. Cell tower data placing Porter's phone at burial sites. Financial records showing payments from Kane Properties to Porter's account, always within days of each disappearance. The evidence was overwhelming. Porter's testimony confirmed what forensics suggested: premeditated murder with family involvement in the cover-up. Strauss's cross-examination was brutal. "Mr. Porter, you're testifying in exchange for immunity, correct?" "Yes." "So you're admitting to being an accomplice to murder, but facing no consequences if you tell the story the prosecution wants to hear." "I'm telling the truth." "The truth as you remember it, or the truth as prosecutors coached you to remember it?" Porter's face flushed. "Nobody coached me. I did what I did. I'm trying to make it right." "By betraying a family who trusted you, who employed you for years? That's your version of making things right?" Morrison objected. Argumentative. Walsh sustained, but the damage was done. Strauss had planted the seed. Porter was a turncoat motivated by self-preservation, willing to say anything to avoid prison. The cross-examination continued for hours. Strauss hammered at inconsistencies in Porter's timeline, questioned why he kept no physical evidence of his crimes, suggested his testimony was fabricated to serve the prosecution's narrative. By the time Strauss finished, some of the jury looked uncertain again, reasonable doubt creeping back in through the cracks Strauss had methodically created. That afternoon, Sarah took the stand. Jack's chest tightened watching her walk to the witness box. She looked small in that chair, vulnerable in ways that had nothing to do with physical size. But when she placed her hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth, her voice was steady. Morrison's direct examination was gentle. Ms. Mitchell, can you tell the jury what happened on the night of September 15th? Sarah took a breath, let it out slowly, then began. I was working at Rose's all-night diner, late shift. Brandon Kane came in drunk. He was angry about rent I owed. Rent you owed to whom? Kane Properties. They owned the trailer park where I lived. Brandon managed it. What happened when he came in? Sarah described the assault. Her voice remained steady, but her hands trembled. She described Brandon's threats, his grabbing her, the moment 5 strangers had intervened. Morrison showed the security footage. The jury watched in silence as Brandon attacked Sarah on screen. Watched her try to de-escalate. Watched him escalate anyway. Watched the violence that had started everything. When the footage ended, Morrison asked, "Why did you decide to press charges?" Sarah looked at Jack, found strength in his presence. Because someone told me I didn't have to accept being hurt, that standing up was possible, and because I have a daughter who's watching how I handle fear. Are you afraid of the defendant? Yes. Even now, in this courtroom? Yes, but I'm here anyway. Because fear doesn't mean surrender. Morrison sat. Strauss stood. Oliver Strauss approached Sarah with the careful courtesy of someone who knew it attacking a sympathetic witness was risky. Ms. Mitchell, you testified you were 3 days late on rent. Is that correct? Yes. And you'd been late before? Sometimes, when money was tight. How often would you say that was? I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 times in the year before. 4 or 5 times. And each time, did Mr. Kane come to collect personally? Sometimes. Were those visits always confrontational? Sarah hesitated. Jack could see her trying to parse the trap. He was always pushy, always inappropriate. But prior to September 15th, had he ever hit you? No, but he threatened, please just answer the question. Had he physically assaulted you before that night? No. So this was an isolated incident of violence, occurring when my client was intoxicated and you were, by your own admission, behind on rent? Morrison objected. Counsel is testifying. Walsh sustained. Mr. Strauss asked questions. Strauss rephrased. Ms. Mitchell, isn't it possible that what happened was a drunken argument that got out of hand? Not premeditated violence, but a momentary loss of control? Sarah's voice hardened. He kicked me in the face. That's not losing control. That's choosing violence. But you can't know what he was thinking. I know what it felt like when his boot connected with my jaw. I know what it sounded like when my teeth hit the floor. I know what it looked like when he laughed about it. That's choosing violence. Strauss shifted tactics. You've become quite close with Mr. Reeves and his associates, haven't you? They helped me when no one else would. More than helped. They paid your bills, provided housing, protected you. That's quite generous toward a stranger. What's your question? My question is whether your testimony might be influenced by gratitude toward people who have significant investment in this case's outcome. Sarah's eyes flashed. My testimony is influenced by what happened to me, by the bones that broke, by the months of healing, by the fear my daughter still has. That's what influences me, not gratitude. Strauss tried several more approaches, all met with variations of the same theme. Sarah refusing to minimize what had happened, refusing to excuse Brandon's violence, refusing to perform the uncertainty Strauss was trying to create. When he finally returned to his seat, Sarah had held her ground. The jury had seen her strength, seen her credibility, seen someone telling truth that cost her to speak. Jack testified next. His military bearing and precise recall made him a prosecution dream, unshakable under cross, credible beyond question. Strauss tried attacking his motives, tried suggesting he'd inserted himself into Sarah's life for personal reasons. But Jack's answers were measured and unassailable. He'd witnessed a crime, he'd intervened, he'd ensured the victim had support. Standard responses from someone who gave a damn about justice. The trial continued into its second week. Character witnesses for both sides. Expert testimony about strangulation mechanics. Digital forensics tracing Brandon's movements. Each day building the prosecution's case brick by methodical brick. Mayor Kane testified for the defense. Denied everything, called Porter a liar. Claimed the prosecution was politically motivated. His testimony was polished but hollow. Too practiced, too careful. The performance of someone who'd spent months preparing for this moment. On cross-examination, Morrison destroyed him, showed financial records connecting Kane to payoffs, played recordings of phone calls where Kane discussed handling problems, presented evidence that Kane had been present at one burial site, his car caught on traffic cameras nearby at the relevant time. By the time Kane left the stand, his own testimony had convicted him. The jury's faces showed disgust. Then came the moment no one anticipated. Brandon Kane stood up. Strauss grabbed his arm, whispered urgently. Brandon shook him off, approached the judge. "Your Honor, I want to speak." Walsh's eyebrows rose. "Mr. Kane, I strongly advise you to consult with your attorney before—" "I don't need to consult. I want to address this court." Strauss was on his feet. "Your Honor, I request a recess to confer with my client." "Denied." Brandon's voice was loud, carrying across the courtroom. "I'm done hiding behind lawyers. I'm done pretending." The courtroom erupted. Walsh's gavel came down hard. "Order! Mr. Kane, sit down or I'll hold you in contempt." But Brandon was beyond control. His face had gone red, veins visible at his temples. "You want to know the truth? Fine. Here's truth. Yes, I killed them. All three. They rejected me. They threatened to expose me. So I made sure they couldn't." Strauss was shouting, "Brandon, shut up! Why, we both know I'm going to prison. At least let me tell them why." Brandon turned to the jury. "You want to understand? They were nothing. Waitresses and housekeepers and nobodies who thought they could say no to a Kane, who thought they mattered. So I showed them what happens when you forget your place." Mayor Kane had his face in his hands. Morrison sat frozen, unable to believe what he was hearing. Sarah's face was white, her hand gripping Diana's. Brandon continued, his voice taking on manic energy. "And yes, my father helped. Of course he helped. That's what family does. You protect your own. You cover up the mistakes. You make problems disappear." He looked directly at Sarah. "You should have disappeared too. Should have taken my offer to forget the rent. But you got brave, got these military assholes involved, ruined everything." Jack felt Marcus's hand on his shoulder, restraining him, keeping him seated. "So yes, I'm guilty. Guilty of everything. Murder, assault, all of it. But you know what? If I hadn't gotten caught, if Porter hadn't flipped, if this waitress had just kept her mouth shut, I'd still be free. Because that's how the world works. Power protects power. And you," he gestured to the jury, "you're all pretending you care about justice. But if I was anyone else, if my father wasn't mayor, you wouldn't even know these women existed. They'd be statistics, forgotten, nothing." Walsh's voice cut through the chaos. "Mr. Kane, sit down now or I will have you removed." "I'm done anyway." Brandon returned to his seat. Looked at Strauss. "Good luck spinning that." The courtroom was silent, stunned. A defendant had just confessed on the stand. Eliminated any doubt. Given the prosecution everything they needed. Walsh adjourned for the day. As guards led Brandon out, he passed Jack's row. Made eye contact. Smiled, a genuine expression of satisfaction that was somehow worse than rage would have been. That evening, Diana gathered everyone in her hotel suite. Her hands shook as she poured whiskey. "I've been practicing law 20 years. Never seen anything like that." "Why would he confess?" Sarah's voice was hollow. "Why give up?" "Because he's a narcissist who'd rather control his own narrative than let us control it." Diana downed the whiskey. "He knows he's going to prison. Knows Porter's testimony sealed it. So he decided to go out in a blaze of honesty that makes him look like he's in control. Jack understood the psychology, had seen it before in enemy combatants who knew they were defeated. The last desperate assertion of agency. Does it change anything legally? No, if anything, it makes prosecution's job easier. But Jack, it also means Brandon has nothing left to lose. No reason to cooperate. No incentive to reveal what else he might have done or who else might have helped him. Other victims? Maybe. Or other crimes. Men like Brandon don't stop at 3. Those are just the ones we found. The room fell silent, each person processing the implications. Finally, Sarah spoke. When will the jury deliberate? Closing arguments tomorrow, then deliberation. Could be hours, could be days. Hours, Jack's voice was certain. After that confession, they won't need long. He was right. Closing arguments the next day were perfunctory. Morrison simply played clips of Brandon's confession, argued the evidence corroborated every word, and asked the jury to deliver justice. Strauss made a half-hearted argument about mental state, about whether someone who confessed so openly could truly be guilty of premeditated murder. The jury looked unconvinced. They deliberated for 3 hours. When they returned, the forewoman's voice was clear. We find the defendant guilty of murder in the first degree, 3 counts. We find the defendant guilty of assault with intent to cause bodily harm. We find the defendant guilty of witness intimidation. Brandon's face showed nothing. No surprise. No remorse. Just blank acceptance. Mayor Kane sobbed openly. Sarah buried her face in Diana's shoulder. Jack felt something release in his chest. Not satisfaction, not joy, just the quiet knowledge that this time, this one time, the system had worked. Justice had been served. The monster was caged. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. Judge Walsh gave Brandon 3 consecutive life sentences plus 20 years. No possibility of parole. Mayor Kane received 40 years for conspiracy and accessory to murder. At 62, it was effectively a life sentence. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Sarah gave a brief statement, her voice steady. Today, justice was served, not just for me, but for Amy Rodriguez, Melissa Torres, and Christina Hayes. For every woman who's been hurt by powerful men. This isn't about revenge, it's about accountability. And I hope it sends a message that no one, no matter how wealthy or connected, is above the law. Jack stood beside, also said nothing. His presence was the statement. 1 year later, Jack drove Sarah and Sophie to Colorado. They were meeting someone important. The cemetery was quiet except for wind through grass. Elena's headstone looked exactly as Jack remembered. Simple, understated, offering no answers. He'd brought flowers. Sarah had brought flowers too. Sophie carried a drawing, 5 stick figures holding hands in front of a house with a tree. Jack knelt at the grave, placed his flowers. Hey, Elena, sorry it's been a while. Sarah and Sophie stood back, giving him space. I know you said the world needs more guardians. I think I finally understand what you meant. His voice was quiet but steady. I couldn't save you. Couldn't be there when you needed me. That'll always hurt, but I saved someone else. Protected her when no one else would. Built something good from what happened to you. Sophie stepped forward, placed her drawing on the grave. Hi, Aunt Elena. I'm Sophie. Jack's my dad now. He talks about you all the time. Jack's throat closed. Sophie had started calling him Dad 3 months ago. He hadn't corrected her. Sarah hadn't either. Some truths didn't need correction. We brought you flowers, Sophie continued with 6-year-old solemnity, because family brings flowers, and your family. They stood there for a while, the 3 of them. A family built from trauma and choice and the kind of love that grows slowly, rooted in shared survival. Finally, Sarah spoke. Elena, I never met you, but your brother is the reason I'm alive. The reason my daughter has a future. So thank you for raising a man who knows how to stand up when standing up matters. They walked back to the truck. Sophie held Jack's hand, her left, Sarah's right, the 3 of them connected. As they drove away, Jack looked in the rearview mirror, saw Elena's grave receding, felt the weight he'd carried for 10 years start to lift. Not gone, never gone, but lighter, manageable, transformed into something that felt like peace. Back in Silver Ridge, the Silent Voices Foundation occupied a building that had once been the Kane Properties headquarters. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Diana had negotiated the transfer as part of Mayor Kane's asset forfeiture, his empire dismantled and repurposed to help the people he'd hurt. Sarah ran the foundation now. Jack handled security. Marcus managed operations. Jax coordinated medical resources. David maintained their database. Tommy taught self-defense classes twice a week. In the first year, they had helped 147 people, provided legal assistance, safe housing, counseling, support networks. The model was expanding. 3 other cities had reached out about replicating it. On the foundation's first anniversary, they held an open house. Journalists came, advocates came, survivors came. A young woman approached Sarah, maybe 23, nervous but determined. "Ms. Mitchell, I'm Maria. I called your hotline 6 months ago. My ex-boyfriend was stalking me. Your foundation helped me get a restraining order. He's in jail now. I just wanted to say thank you." Sarah pulled her into a hug. "You saved yourself. We just stood beside you then. Can I volunteer? Help others the way you helped me?" "We'd love that." Jack watched from across the room. Watched Sarah transform lives the way she'd transformed her own. Watched Sophie playing with other children. Survivors' kids who had found community here. Watched his brothers integrate into civilian life through purpose and mission. Marcus appeared beside him. "You did good, brother." "We did good." "Yeah, we did." Marcus paused. "You proposing to her anytime soon?" Jack's hand moved to his pocket, felt the small box he'd been carrying for 3 weeks. "Maybe, if she says yes." "She'll say yes. That woman looks at you like you hung the moon." "I didn't hang anything, just showed up when it mattered. That's all anyone can do. Show up, stand up, give a damn." Marcus clapped him on the shoulder. "Elena would be proud." The name didn't hurt anymore, just settled warm in Jack's chest. That night, after the open house ended and Sophie was asleep, Jack found Sarah on the foundation's porch. She stood looking at the stars, Nevada sky clear enough to see galaxies. "Quite a day," she said without turning. "Yeah." Jack moved beside her. "Sarah, can I ask you something?" "Always." He pulled out the box, opened it. Inside was a simple ring. Nothing fancy, nothing that screamed money. Just honest and solid and real. "6 months ago, Marcus told me I'd become your person, Sophie's person, that this was more than a mission." Jack's voice was steady despite his racing heart. "He was right. You two are my family, my home. The reason I wake up wanting to build something instead of just surviving. So I'm asking, will you marry me? Will you let me be your person officially? Will you choose me the way I chose you?" Sarah turned. Her eyes were wet, but her smile was pure joy. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." He slipped the ring on her finger, pulled her close, kissed her with the certainty of someone who'd found what he'd been looking for without knowing he was looking. Behind them, through the foundation's window, Sophie's drawing was visible on the wall. 5 stick figures holding hands. Family. The next morning, Jack visited Elena's grave one more time, alone, before the world woke up. He knelt, placed one hand on the cold stone. "I'm getting married, Elena, to someone strong and brave and exactly what I need. We're building a life, building something that matters. And I know, this is what you wanted for me, to stop running, to let people in. To use what happened to you as fuel for doing good." The wind rustled grass, carried the scent of flowers Jack had left. "I kept my promise, never ignored someone calling for help. Never let distance be my excuse. Never let good men stay silent." His voice cracked. "I saved her, Elena. Saved her and her daughter. And maybe in some way, that saves me too." He stood, looked at her name carved in stone, felt peace settle like a physical weight. "Rest easy, sister. Your brother's okay. Finally, really okay." He walked back to his truck, drove toward the life he'd built from ashes and oaths, and the simple choice to stand up when standing up mattered. Behind him, the sun rose over Elena's grave, light touching stone, warming the earth where she slept. And somewhere in memory, in spirit, in the quantum space between what was and what could be, Elena smiled. Her brother had found his way home.